Let's get ready to RPG! So it begins. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another quasi-late night stream where we've been deep diving the One Ring 2nd Edition. This is a game by Free League, and it's, of course, in its 2nd edition, that came out a couple years ago, but we just took a look at it earlier this year. So about 8, 9, 10 months ago, and was, pretty pleasantly surprised by it. Haven't really thought too much about it since then, but recently I've been, going back into my Tolkien shit, as I do from time to time, and I remembered this game, and I had picked up the new starter set, which came out just this past Gen Con. And I decided to crack it open, and I was flipping through it, and it has the full rules-ish for the game. And I remember being like, oh, this is actually a lot cooler than I remember. And I was like, oh, I should take a deep dive. I should take a really closer look at the game and actually go over each of the steps, make character, the whole shebang. And so I said, that's what we do here on Deep Dives. Now, some deep dives are games that I have a lot of experience with, but in this case, this is more of like a deep look rather than a deep dive, I guess, because, this is not a game that I have a ton of, stuff, experience for. So we got a couple of things that we can talk about, but one I want to talk about is the recent news that Asmodee, who is one of the world's it's a French company. They're one of the largest publishers of board games in the world. And they are owned themselves by a horrible corporate overlord master named the Embracer Group. And over the last number of years, they have been, for lack of a better word, monopolizing large swaths of the board game industry. And sometimes that means that role-playing games sort of get swept up in the current. And this may have affected you in ways that you don't necessarily know. For me personally, it was affected when Asmodee bought Lock, Stock, and Barrel Fantasy Flight Games. And when they bought Fantasy Flight Games, at the time, Fantasy Flight Games was the publisher of Legend of the Five Rings, the 5th edition game, which I really loved. Asmodee bought it, and the RPG division of Fantasy Flight Games was sort of broken out, restructured. The titles were sent over to a Spanish, I want to say, studio called Edge Studios. And the RPG line kind of shit the bed, for lack of a better word. The Fantasy Flight Games, basically, RPGs have kind of died. And in my personal opinion, now I have not looked at the Children of the Five Winds, which is the new unicorn book for Legend of the Five Rings. But I can tell you that Writ of the Wilds, which was the Dragon source book, which was the last one that came out, which was from Edge Studio, I think sucked. I don't even think it was worth the paper it was printed on. And not to mention, they've been really bad with meeting deadlines, and I don't play the Star Wars game. The Star Wars, Genesis game, Edge of the Empire or whatever. But I understand that has been sort of on life support itself. So, TLDR, when Asmodee acquires a company, it's usually a really, really bad sign. Now, the problem is that Lord of the Rings has always been very complicated from a certain perspective because they only do these licenses. The licenses are for a limited number of times. And it has been the case that no one has really held on to this license from a role-playing game perspective for very long ever. And the history of Lord of the Rings, I could show you up here on my bookshelf. We have Middle-earth role-playing game, which is the original, the great-granddaddy, which, of course, was produced by Iron Crown Enterprises back in the 80s. And then you had Lord of the Rings. You had this version of the game, which came out around the time that the movies came out in line with New Line Cinema. And this was produced by Decipher. Yes, that's right. The people who made card games. And this was a wholly separate system. This was the Lord of the Rings role-playing game system. And then there was this version of the game, which came out for 5th edition. This was produced by Cubicle 7. And, of course, Cubicle 7 also made the One Ring 1st edition. And so then, eventually, the license went to Free League. And Free League produced the One Ring 2nd edition, which is what we are looking at today. Now, the problem is that Embracer Group, that is the secret, quasi-secret, corporate overlord masters of Asmodee, also, in the last couple of years, bought Middle-earth Enterprises, as I understand it. So that means that Embracer Group now owns Middle-earth Enterprises. So they get to decide who gets the license. And it's my understanding that Embracer Group, as part of a consolidation or coordination, basically said, hey, we're moving all the Middle-earth stuff over to Asmodee. And so that umbrella has sort of now fallen under Asmodee. Now, what Asmodee is going to do with those licenses, I should say Asmodee / Middle-earth Enterprises / Embracer Group, what they're going to do with those licenses, I don't know. But historically, they usually shit the bed, and sometimes games go out of print. So what started off this whole comment was this whole rant, I should say, or tangent was someone making a point that I guess they were aware that apparently Mike Shea, the Sly Flourish, apparently maybe broke this news or talked about this news, and said that people may want to grab a physical copy of the One Ring, given the recent rights acquisition. So now that Middle Earth Enterprises and Asmodee are sort of combined into that respect, we'll see. Now, does this mean that Free League is going to lose the license? No. I don't know that we've heard anything from them. So, and of course, the truth of the matter is, no company has ever held on to the license forever. That's just been the way it's been. One company gets the game, they produce game products for a number of years, and then eventually they lose the license and it goes to somebody else. And sometimes they really, really change up the game and you get a completely different experience. Now, with all that being said, I don't know how many people we're going to have here tonight, but I did pick up a 5th edition copy. This was at Barnes & Noble of the Lord of the Rings role-playing game. It was the only one they had on stock, and it is 5th edition, but we'll probably give this away as a giveaway at some point. And because believe it or not, the 5th edition version of this game is actually pretty good. I mean, it's 5th edition, don't get me wrong. But if you have, players who would never agree, to play, anything other than 5th edition or anything other than D20 at least, it's a pretty good deal. Yes, please, I'll have it. Yeah, Beowulf, that sounds great. The last time I shipped something overseas, it cost me 3 times as much as the product itself. So I'm going to probably pass on that. Let's see here. No, Free League had no call. Free League had no call. I mean, the people who get it, the license, would never get any sort of benefit. For sure. Unfortunately. Keith, I fall asleep to the stream often as myself. Just kidding. Twitch gang, rise up. What's up, Jams TV? Good to see you. Sorry, buddy. You're the one who lives on a continent very far away. But also, too, it's just shipping prices have gotten absolutely outrageous, especially outside of the U.S. I don't know if that has anything to do with our current political system or if it's just the rising cost of shipping or something like that. It's good stuff. But yeah, like if you want to get a book, maybe now's the time, because I don't know how long these things are going to be available or around. So we'll find out. We'll see together. Any case. Now, yeah, someone mentioned, hey, Derek must be bored. Yeah, basically. I don't really have a whole lot going on right now. The last couple of weeks, months really, have been fairly busy with stuff for my family, stuff for my my house, going to Gen Con and Vegas and all sorts of stuff. And I do have PAX Unplugged coming up here in a couple weeks. But yeah, I mean, I like to stream. I mean, especially, you guys know, back in the early summer before the con season really blew up, I was streaming like 15, 16, 8, 20 hours a week. So we'd like to get back to that. So yeah, I don't know how we'll probably do this deep dive. Maybe we'll do another deep dive. That should be enough. I think maybe 10 hours or something like that to get through the whole book. But we do have 2 goals. Today we have a super chat goal, which is to set up the next deep dive series. I don't know what that's going to be, but some people really like doing these. Now, again, these aren't really super popular. They never are, but I really enjoy doing them. And this is the kind of deep analysis that this channel can afford to do because we have incredible supporters. And then we also have a tip goal down there, which is convince Bob and Company. Now, I don't know who and Company is, but it's number of my people who I know in person, which is to play the One Ring one shot and to give it a shot, and maybe we record that and bring that to the masses. That'd be pretty fun. So that's the goal. Con, you love it. I will be ready for a break after PAX Unplugged. I'm kind of getting con burned out. Now, I will say I'm really excited to go to Gary Con next year because I've never been, and it's been on my bucket list since they started it up after Gary's death. And then number 2, I'm really looking forward to Origins next year because, fingers crossed, we are in the process of trying to secure a private gaming space just for the Knights of Last Call. And that is such a cool personal flex for me that I'm really looking forward to that. So we're back on the Canada Dry. I will. I've never been to PAX Unplugged this year. I've never been to PAX before, ever. And then this year I went to PAX East, PAX West, and now I'm going to PAX Unplugged. Thank you, Stephen Glicker, and Roll for Combat. Well, yeah, it'll be NightCon Session 0, right? It's not officially NightCon 1. It's NightCon Session 0, where we kind of figure out what NightCon might be like. It's a con within a con. It's kind of the best of both worlds because it means that if you get bored, I can't afford to, provide people with all of the amenities that a full convention would have. So if you get bored or you want to do something else, you want to take a look at the dealer hall or you want to go sign up to a different event or something that we're not running, then you can go and do that. So we'll see. Okay. Yeah. Conception. Hopefully not. Hopefully no conception going on here. I have a new TTRPG you can do a deep dive on. Well, it would be a first look Roll for Combat because I've never read it. Thunder Road Vendetta, the RPG. It's like a racing game. Thunder Road Vendetta sounds like a Mad Max racing game. Alrighty. What do we want to get into here? Well, I guess we'll get into the book. All right. So, as a reminder, last time we covered chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we talked about how action resolution works in this game, how you make tests with the dice, with the D12s. With a single D12 and a bunch of D6s that are tied to your character sheet. Unfortunately, here's the character sheet. Now, I will say something, which somebody pointed out to me, and I didn't realize it. Let me take a look here. Let's see if I can fix this. Let's go single page, and then let's turn this to the left. Okay, so here is the character sheet. And apparently, they've recently updated this character sheet on the one that you download from the One Ring website, and I get and looking at my my One Ring starter set, I can confirm that the pre-gens in here do actually have a different setup. Now, it's a little bit the new character sheet is a little bit cleaner. I will freely admit that. It's a little bit cleaner. But what I like about this old sheet is that everything that tests strength, which includes the skills of awe and athletics and awareness and hunting and song and craft, along with your 4 combat proficiencies, are all under the column of strength, because your strength TN is determined by your strength TN is used for not only these skills, but for these combat proficiencies. Meanwhile, the heart column uses all of these skills, but also if you do need to make a valor test, it again is tested against your heart TN. And if you have to make a wisdom test, it is tested against your wits TN. So that is really cool. And then we learned that throughout the course of the game, you will earn adventure points and skill points. Skill points are used to raise anything in this row, and then adventure points are used to raise anything in this bottom row. So I thought that was a really, really cool way to do it. Now, the updated sheet's a little bit, cleaner, I think, in some ways, but this actually has a lot more, I guess, value in its sort of flow. Jordan, I did listen a little bit to your Tom Bombadil song, Tom Bombadil. So Jordan was telling us about the running a One Ring game, and because during the stream, some people expressed, kind of confusion that Tom Bombadil could be your patron, Tom Bombadil and Goldberry, and in Jordan's they said they're like that was one of our patrons. But overall, I mean, I love the look of this sheet. Of course, I think this is great. This is the one in the book and with the PDF. But yeah, it's interesting that they updated this sheet a little bit, and it doesn't have that same flow as it used to, which is kind of interesting. We'll also get into this today. This is the journey sheet or the journey log, and I think the idea of it is that you, as the PCs, and kind of as a group, really. But as the players, characters, you kind of fill out this journey log for every journey that you take. And I got to say something here. I think there's a lot of, and we'll get into this. We'll get into the journey rules. Some people, in fact, one of our Thaddeus, one of our notable patrons, who has a lot of experience running this game, had some reservations about certain elements of the game, and we can talk a little bit about those tonight. But one of the things they said is they thought, well, the journey rules can be a little bit lengthy and kind of whatever. And I guess that's probably reasonable. That's true. But I mean, journeying is so much of what Lord of the Rings is about. And not only that, I love this idea that as your campaigns as your campaigns build on, you will have almost like an atlas. You will have a ledger. You'll have a journal. You'll have a log of all of these different journeys that your company went on. And I love physical artifacts of a campaign. I've railed before, I've gone on before about why I hate soulless character sheets, spreadsheets, why I don't like digital character sheets, for a number of reasons. But, I think the aesthetic matters for me so much because I enjoy that sort of physical element. It's the same reason why, there might be certain advantages to, say, digital books. And I tried to do the whole, Nook Kindle thing, but ultimately I went back to paper books because I love having that physicality, and the connection to the material is so important to me. And I lost that when I had just, digital books on an e-ink screen. So, anyways, let's fix this. There we go. So, in a case, we covered chapter 1, chapter 1 is the prologue. Chapter 2 is how to resolve actions. Chapter 3 is adventurers, where we deal with, the basically creating characters, choosing your character's heroic culture, basically their race, but it's, race plus culture. So as an example, when you choose your quote unquote race, one of the races could be Bardings, which are men from Dale, descended from the King of Bard, or King Bard, or, of the people of Bard. But you also have the men of Bree, which are also men. They just happen to come from, the Bree land and the areas surrounding Bree and Eriador. So it's kind of like race plus culture rolled up into one. And then we talked about making a character, and we made a dwarf guy. And then we talked about the different characteristics, how skills work on your character sheet, endurance and hope, which are sort of used to fuel, basically a form of hit points, and hope is sort of a quasi form of meta currency that you can use in order to help other people, help your allies. You can use it to give yourself a bonus die on a skill roll. And of course, if you run out of endurance or hope, your character can suffer consequences. But it's not just getting to 0. If your endurance becomes lower than your character's load and fatigue scores, which you get from carrying too much equipment or journeying too far. Your character will become weary. And if your hope becomes too low underneath your amount of accumulated shadow, your character will become miserable. And both of these are the primary negative conditions in the game. And they have a really cool method of sort of of dealing with their negativity, which is they make your bad results worse. They don't affect the maximum value that you can get with a skill roll. Instead, they make it so that, kind of like how advantage and disadvantage, one of the things I think is kind of cool about advantage and disadvantage is you can't actually roll better or roll worse than you could otherwise. Like people always say, oh, advantage is worth +5, roughly, on a D20. And that's true. But with advantage, you can never roll a 25. You know what I mean? You can't roll a 24. The average shifts up, but you can't ever roll higher than a 20 on a D20. And that's kind of an interesting mechanic. And so in this case, with weary and miserable, it doesn't actually make your best results worse. Instead, it makes your worst results worse. And it's a really interesting way of affecting being a penalty, the way disadvantage is, but without screwing over your ability to, roll well, which I think is really, really neat. And then we talked about valor and wisdom. Valor and wisdom are sort of the two ways that your character progresses. We could think of them as levels. They are scores on our character sheet. And as valor rises, our character becomes more renowned, and we will be bequeathed with, cool pieces of legendary gear and awesome heirlooms and a lot of, basically cool hero treasures. And as our wisdom increases, our character will receive virtues, which are basically the equivalent of, feats, for lack of a better word. They are tied. There's a generic list, but then each specific heritage, heroic culture gets a list as well. Valor and wisdom are also two basically stats or skills that are used later on to try to resist the power of the shadow. And we haven't really talked about how you acquire shadow, but TLDR, when your character, sees some scary shit or is affected by some dark sorcery, your character may need to make a valor test or a wisdom test to try to avoid acquiring shadow. Just the, kind of the don't look too long into the abyss lest the abyss looks back, right? So very cool stuff, and we kind of got into that. So that brings us tonight to chapter 6, which is the adventuring phase. The adventuring phases. Now, remember that the game is basically divided into 2 phases. And, from our torchbearer, burning wheel, mouse guard aesthetic, we kind of are familiar with this sort of back and forth. Even Blades in the Dark, in a certain way, has, the score, and then you have, downtime, and then you have a score, and then you have a downtime, and then you have a score, and then you have a downtime. In this game, more similar to Mouse Guard, the idea is that the adventuring phase is when the heroes are going out into the wild to accomplish a goal. And the GM, the lore master in this game, is kind of calling the shots. The lore master is going to be framing scenes. The lore master's job in the adventuring phase is to challenge the heroes. It's to put obstacles in their path and to make sure that they properly account for the threat that the shadow provides. And in a sense, the heroes are going to be reacting, and the lore master, the game master, is going to frame a scenario, a situation, a scene, and then the heroes are going to react, and then we might go back and forth. We might make some skill checks. We might we might have a bunch of conversation. We're going to do normal role-playing shit. Sometimes we might trigger something like a combat. And then after the adventuring phase is over, which could take 1, 2, maybe 3 sessions. It really depends on, have we accomplished the goal that we set out to do? Then the game kind of shifts into a more player-driven phase, the fellowship phase, where the players retreat back for weeks, maybe even months, to a refuge, to a safe refuge. And it could be Rivendell, could be the Inn of the Prancing Pony. Maybe it's the Green Dragon, maybe it's Mythlond, or maybe it's Lorien, whatever. And the group kind of again does things at a more slower pace and recovers and prepares and plans. And there's sort of a yin-yang relationship where, as the players are doing their fellowship phase, they are setting up for the next adventuring phase. Elder Goblin Game says, did someone say Mouse Guard? Yes, I think Mouse Guard is amazing. I love it. Ironically, I've never run 2nd edition. Anytime I've ever played or run Mouse Guard, it's always been 1st edition. So there might be some weird changes in Mouse Guard 2nd edition that would really trip me up. I own Mouse Guard 2nd edition, but I've never actually played 2nd edition. But I think they're I think 2nd edition and 1st edition are pretty, similar in that way. Darth Malicious says, if you have time, tell us please how you handled paper-based character sheets back before tablets and phone at your table. Well, that's really simple. We just had paper-based character sheets that people used and filled out. I mean, that's all we did. Now, I will say this. Let me actually see here. Let me turn on my overhead camera. We can see it in the background there. Hey, look. Okay. So let me say this. I'm going to get something. Okay, so this is what I wanted to say. Because we were looking at this the other day, and just because it's actually written somewhat legibly. This is 1st edition stuff. Okay. Oh, perfect. Found it. Okay. Okay. Here we go. This is a character sheet from. This is a character sheet from a not 3rd edition, but from a. Let me see if I can adjust this a little bit, make it a little bit easier to see. Okay, so this is a character sheet from Pathfinder, and come on, why is this looking like crap? Hold a sec. And one of the things I really want to bring up here is that. Okay. This is a character sheet of a 20th level paladin. Okay. And all right, this is a character sheet of a 20th level paladin. And this was played by our buddy Zach. And one of the things I really want to point out here as I flip this character sheet over is this is the back of this character sheet. Okay. These are all the feats that this character had. These are all the special abilities that this character had. These are all actually all the mythic abilities that this character had. And we don't even actually see the character's spell sheet, which is on a different sheet. Because obviously it's a 20th level paladin. This character also had spells. And here are a variety of potions. What do we got here? We got a potion of cure moderate wounds, wand of cure moderate wounds, potion of water breathing, potion of disguise self, potion of resist energy, potion of meld and stone. What looked to be velociraptor steaks, faux wafers, potion of lesser restoration, flask of holy water, sun rods, 50,000 GP worth of diamond dust. Okay, so obviously this character had a lot of stuff going on, as a 20th level paladin does. Not to mention it's actually a 20th level paladin mythic tier 7 from Pathfinder. This character also had a bunch of weird abilities that it gained. Obvious, that makes sense. It was from the time we went to the Dinosaur Island. Now, the reason I bring all this up is because the player who played this character, Zach, needed to know what all of this shit meant. Like, sure, you could make a little note about what, Aura of Justice did, Aura of Faith did, what their mercies were, Divine Health, Lay on Hands, Smite Dragon, Spiritual Servant, Lord of the Wendways, Crusader of the Clear, Aura of Good, Greed, Heart. You know what I mean? Like, you could put all these things and you can make a little note, but ultimately, unless you wanted to be flipping through a book all the time, which, we did not, then you had to learn what these things do. And I think, to a certain extent, that the modern day digital character sheet, just, you lose that, you get lazy. And in some cases, you don't even necessarily know how the game works, really. AC 48, not too shabby. And of course, classic Pathfinder 1, Pathfinder 2, or Pathfinder 1/3rd edition character, touch AC 12. But so any case, 380 hit points, pretty decent. So in any case, what I'm trying to say here is, it required that the person basically, know what they're doing. And, it's the same way that before the advent of digital, word processors and computers, people had to know how to spell. People had to know what the rules of grammar were, because if you didn't know what they were, then nothing was fixing them for you. And so I think that aside from the fact that this character sheet here is probably 15 years old, or give or take, and it's cool that I have this and I can, pull that out. I appreciated that the physical quality of those character sheets made people, I think, be more present, not just physically, like they actually, they were paying attention to each other, but I also think it made them more present in the gaming system, and I think it made them more skilled and more able to pay attention. I have played with people who are on their computers, and I don't mean like they're playing World of Tanks, although I will say there is I haven't seen it in a while, but there is a Pathfinder Society game that plays up at my local game store. And one of the guys, and I think the GM knows this. I don't think they're like clueless to it. But they're all on tablets or computers, and one of the guys just sits there and like plays like World of Tanks while they're playing. I mean, it's like a 10-person group, PF2. I can only imagine how long that they could go through. Severe Verona says, I was a Pathfinder Society coordinator. I had so much of that committed to memory, the useful knowledge I could have had instead. Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're 100% right, Ronin. Like, people knew their shit. And what I was going to say is, and again, my experience is anecdotal. I've played a lot of people, but like when I've played with people who are on computers or on tablets, at cons or game stores, and I've played with people in person on paper, I have found that the people who play online digitally, or play with a digital representation, tend to pay attention less because they don't have any of their things memorized. So they are constantly forced to have to like look up, what does this do? I don't know. And so when it's someone else's turn or the GM is describing something, they're head down, looking at their keyboard, looking at their tablet, and they're trying to figure out what they should do. They're engaged to the game. They're they want to play well, but because they don't have it, second nature, they don't have this ability to just go, yeah, I'm a seasoned veteran. I know how to run my character because they've been doing it for so long. And maybe in the beginning, it's very possible. In fact, it's almost entirely possible that in the beginning they did maybe have to look up stuff occasionally, and it was a little bit of a pain in the ass. But because it was a pain in the ass, that really gave you an incentive to learn it, so you didn't have to keep flipping open to your book over and over and over and over and over again. So, one of the things that I really appreciate for that is how much that really ties people, into the game. Now, are there downsides? Of course. This stack of character sheet, which is inside of a plastic folder, this entire packet is Tim's character from that campaign. And needless to say, it's got, papers on top of papers on top of papers, right? You've got the character sheet itself, and then Tim's chicken scratch. Then you have Tim's buff list for the day. So these are all the spells that Tim would cast on himself every single day. Greater bull strength, greater bear's endurance, cat's grace, resist energy. What I'm assuming is fire, acid, cold, and electricity. Apparently no sonic. Greater heroism, telepathic bond, moment of prescience, I'm assuming this is. Protection from energy fire. Heroic invocation, protection from energy sonic. Oh, there it is. Okay. So interesting. He had resist energy, fire, acid, cold, and electricity, but he had a protection from energy, sonic, and fire as well. Greater spell immunity, fireball, maze, dominate monster, and irresistible dance. If you know what greater spell immunity does and you've played high-level Pathfinder 1, you'll understand why those three are out there. I don't know why the fireball's there, but certainly it makes sense to be immune to maze, dominate monster, and Odo's irresistible dance. Haste, bear shape, mythic, chill, shield. These are all of his different stat buff lines. These are some stats for his celestial summons that he could summon. Here's a lower level version of the character sheets that little item cards that I had given out, for special items. I used to tend to basically give out magic items. I like to give them out on cards. So here is these are obviously all custom items. This is the Torque of Heroic Sacrifice. Cast level 13 throat slot once per day as an immediate action with the command word of "I've got this." Jet black iron torque crafted in the form of 2 grasped hands. Take all damage dealt to an ally by an attack. Line of sight. Damage becomes untyped. So there's that. Oh, obvious. You're right. He was permanently. That's true. Tim was vulnerable permanently to fire because he was cursed. And so he was probably really afraid of being fireballed. We have the Bolt shirt. This is a caster level 10 torso item. Once per day as a move action with the command word snap, crackle, pop. Teleport up to 100 feet with line of sight and line of effect. Your teleport line becomes a lightning bolt for 4d6 plus 40 electricity damage. Reflex save DC 18 for half. And then here is Theophrastus's Circlet of Rapid Casting. This is a 15,000 GP that goes on your head. It's a circlet. It has 3 charges, which are renewed each day at dawn. As a swift action, you can use it. For 1 charge, you can cast up to a 2nd level spell as a swift action. For 2 charges, you can cast up to a 3rd level spell as a swift action. And for 3 charges, you can cast up to a 4th level spell as a swift action. So point is, Tim had all this, but it would have been completely impractical for him to actually have to look all this stuff up all the time. So he had to memorize it and know what he could do and, know where he could do it. I mean, if you watch high level, WoW people or whatever play their video game, they're not figuring out what their command bar does in the middle of a combat or a raid. They've got that shit ingrained and they're just boom, boom, boom. Anyways, So that was kind of a side tangent there. But yes, actually, Beowulf, it was the complete opposite. He was not dropping fireballs himself. I forgot about it. Tim acquired an artifact called the Scepter of Gaul, which let Tim summon a dimensional duplicate of him from a different time stream. And every time he used it, he aged a year. He was a human. But in order to acquire it, when he reached in, his character became permanently cursed. And I was like, Tim, this is like, Wish can't cure this. Miracle can't cure this. You are just permanently cursed. You will always take double damage on fireball or on fire damage. And so Tim was like, ugh. So that's probably why he was super worried about fire. Anyways. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Oh, severe. Yeah, absolutely. Of course. Severed Rowan says, I had a character sheet for every version of my barbarian. Not raging, raging in feats and spells. Not raging plus, you get my point. Absolutely. In fact, it was pretty common back then for like Smith and, yeah, here we go. This is Tim's, session buff sheet, session active sheet. So like, he would write down, he had his character sheet, but then what he would do is with all of his spells and feats, he would get all of these written down. Obviously too, once we started getting, mythic stuff, it became quite out of pocket. So, you want to know what your AC was, what it was all coming from, what your fort save was coming from. So you had this all figured out so you could know what your character sheet, because like your character sheet was like your base form, this was like your final form, And, there was a time in my life where that was really, really, really cool. Darth Malicious says, sorry about the tangent. Darth Malicious, it's what we do here. We're here for the tangents, by the way, we did receive a super chat during all of that. I didn't even notice. I'm sorry. Let's see here. From Victor for the next deep dive. Thank you for the $10, Victor. I really, really appreciate you. Sorry about missing that, Victor. Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah, the deep dives are a lot of fun, and I'd love, if we can get that goal finished, I'd love to start figuring out what that's going to be. Could be a game that I have a lot of experience with. We just haven't really had a chance to deep dive, or maybe it's a newer game, one that I'm passionate about. Obviously, I don't want to deep dive a game that I don't really know, or I'm not really looking to learn more about. I do not have a lot of experience with this game. I played the original starter set one shot at a con. So I've played the game once, never run it, but I am very passionate about it. Obviously, I know a lot about Lord of the Rings. I'm very passionate about Lord of the Rings, so it's kind of cool that we can, dig into that as well. Vintage says, I totally understand that people love PF1 and PF2. My group is still playing Pathfinder 1 and have no ability to memorize all that craziness. These games are not for me. Yeah, I mean, it was certainly a different time and a different place, Vintage. I would also say, Vintage, that back then we used to sometimes play once, twice a week. You were getting a lot of reps with these characters. Nowadays, we might be playing once a month if we're lucky, and it's going to be really hard for people to remember all that shit, for sure. Absolutely, Elder. It's fun how much of an old character sheet, it tells the story. It absolutely is. And also too, one of the things that we always used to take pride in was that someone else, like if someone came to your character, years later, they might be like, I don't even know how to run this character, right? Like there was like a skill, you might have had a really broken character, but yeah. Darth Malicious says, you have a cool table when you trust their post-its to be brought back to the next session without fudging. Oh yeah, no, I wouldn't even begin to think that my players were ever doing that. I mean, again, if I thought my players were doing that, I think we'd have much more significant issues for sure. Anyways, let's get back to Lord of the Rings. So this is about the adventuring phase. This is when the GM or the lore master is sort of putting the screws into players. Now I do want to say a couple of things here, relative to games that we've been covering lately, games that I like. This is not a low prep, no prep game, insofar as I can tell. games like Daggerheart, games like Dungeon World or PBTA games, Avatar Legends, you name it, very much have a sort of Fabula Ultima. Really encourage you to not, quote unquote, railroad your players, to not have an adventure plan, to have everything be very collaborative and give the players a lot of say in building the world. And this game is not like that. And you might say, oh, so Derek, so you hate it. No. Remember, I believe different games serve different purposes. When I get together with my group of friends, well, not recently, but to play board games, I don't always play the same board game. There are different board games for different itches and different experiences. And I understand that there's a certain desire to be in a game situation where the GM has sort of crafted an adventure. Now, granted, I think it's cool that the players can, that it's not, it shouldn't be a railroad. Like the GM shouldn't know how it's going to turn out. But the adventuring phase is very much about the GM setting out the challenges ahead of time and framing these up and having, you know, some maps ready to go and some stats ready to go. And also, because it's Lord of the Rings, I think it loses a little bit of something if the players aren't able to sort of truly discover the world that you're in. And, you know, I also think there's a bit of resonance here that does a lot of work. I've talked about resonance before. Resonance is where you describe something and it works just the way that you think it works. Contrary to, you know, shockingly, a lot of the ways that we think about elves and dwarves and stuff like that come from Tolkien. So there's a lot of heavy lifting that's done in a Lord of the Rings game because even if they're not like Tolkien freaks, most people get it. You know, they understand what these things are and what these things do. You know, before the movies came out, if you told somebody, you know, oh, it's a legacy of the Nazgul, you know, it's one of the ring wraiths, they'd be like, unless they read the books, they would be like, who, what is a ring wraith? What's a Nazgul? Now, nowadays we sort of take for granted rather, that if I were to say like, oh, this is the domain of one of the Nazgul, this is the domain of Kamul the Easterling or something like that. They may not know who Kamul the Easterling is, but they know what a Nazgul is and they know what a ring wraith is. So again, you can really sort of get a lot of advantage out of that. All right. So how does an adventuring phase work? So this is the largest part of the gameplay. It's made up of a series of adventuring phases. Again, the game goes in adventuring phase, fellowship phase, adventuring phase, fellowship phase. As the name suggests, this is where most of the action takes place. During the adventuring phase, it is the job of the lore master to challenge the players, putting them in difficult circumstances, setting fiendish riddles for them to solve, and confronting them with formidable opponents. The gameplay is a dynamic narrative as the players take action to explore the situations that they encounter. The lore master then describes what happens, and the players react again. Repeat, repeat, repeat. The lore master keeps the story flowing through a mixture of preparation and improvisation. Now, again, this is, I think, for this style of game, this is absolutely the best of both worlds, right? Because you might say, so what's improvisation? Well, if you don't have any improvisation, that means that the game is a railroad, right? That the players are going to go here and then here and then here, and you don't have to improvise because you will either force their hand or you will fudge or you will do something that makes sure that they hit the exact beats that you want to do. That is not what this game is talking about. This game really wants you to create a story that is truly novel and unique, but it does put the GM, the lore master, in the driver's seat, and that during the adventuring phase, it is the job of the lore master to challenge the players. So there is an element here of, believe it or not, challenge-based play, right? And while I'm not trying to say that this game doesn't care about telling a good story, this is kind of one of those games that's like the story that comes out of this game will be because you were challenged. And, it's a little bit more traditional, honestly, in that way. And again, we haven't seen in this game many, if any, what I would call narrative mechanics. This is a game that trusts that just the act of playing it and the mechanics that they have put into it will create interesting, intense situations. And hopefully that will, be of an enjoyment to you. And, there's no safety rails. There's no I choose to surrender. I choose to avoid death. If your character is wounded, they could die right instantaneously. So, and that's it. Done. To the point where, what happened? To the point where this game has rules for raising up your heir, your next of kin, your heir apparent who will take over your journeying after you are presumably killed or retired. Again, there's multiple ways to kind of lose your character in this game. One of which is death, but another one is that you kind of lose your character to the shadow. An average adventuring phase should last between 2 to 3 sessions. So there you go. 2 to 3 sessions of play, with each session clocking in at around 3 hours of gaming. So you're looking at 6 to 9 hours. I mean, of course, it could go 4, of course, but an adventuring phase is probably not something that you're going to wrap up in a single session. Generally speaking, every session follows the same structure: introduction, scenes, and then we end the session. Severed Ronin, we were talking about this on the Discord today. Beowulf is a huge Pendragon fan, and I was stuck behind my thing. And I am a huge Song of Ice and Fire RPG fan. I think this game is it's got some problems, but it is really, really cool, and it is really, really well written. And for some odd reason, my camera doesn't want to focus on it. Focus. No? You don't want to focus? All right. So yeah, exactly. Now, it's not quite the same, Severed Ronin, but given the fact that this game is supposed to potentially take place over many years, potentially even a decade of play, roughly speaking, the game expects you to maybe go on 3 or 4 adventures per year. Again, a fellowship phase can be several weeks, up to a month, or even several months, especially the Yule fellowship phase, where it's supposed to basically take, basically the entire winter, means that, just after even playing a dozen sessions, your character may have gone through a year or 2 of their character's life. So yeah, it's a game where there's kind of a ship of Theseus, where your character may retire or die, and a new character comes in, but the company endures. So. Beowulf says, speaking of Beowulf, in our short campaign that Thad ran, I was an elven lady, and man, I've never felt more like an elf before, occupying a troll's attention single-handedly while the party dealt with the other ones. So, dancing around, magically succeeding at skill, walking on top of grass, it was so cool. Yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty cool to me. Shadram, what's up, Shadram? The setting books encourage site-based adventures, which do a good job of selling the prep plus improv GM life. Absolutely, Shadram. This is, if we think about, Lord of the Rings, it's kind of defined by these cool locations, right? And the journeys between them, right? The journey to Moria, the journey to Lothlorien, the journey to Amon Hen, the journey to Edoras and Helm's Deep, the Paths of the Dead, right? And that's just the books. Darth says there's so many plus mechanics in this game, but I'd be done with the lore holding fans back. And Darth, you know what? Respect. I mean, I'm not one of those really I like the lore, but I'm not going to poo-poo on somebody if they don't know everything that I know. And by the way, I know nothing compared to what crazy people do. I mean, there are people out there who actually know how to write in Tengwar. I don't know how to write in Tengwar. So each session starts with the lore master presenting the current situation of the players. This usually sets the date or time of year. And again, this speaks to the non-linearity of the game, where, between sessions, potentially if there's a fellowship phase, it could be a whole new season. It could be the end of the year. Now, there are games that deal with this. The aforementioned Pendragon. One of the things I think is so cool about Pendragon is this idea of generational play. I think that's awesome. Now, Lord of the Rings doesn't quite get to this, but you kind of see it, right? Like, think about it this way. In Lord of the Rings, or in The Hobbit, we see Glowing go on this adventure with Bilbo. Well, Glowin's son, Gimli, is a member of the Fellowship of the Ring. Well, who else obviously famously went on that? Bilbo Baggins, who took upon as his heir his nephew, who he adopted him as his heir, and Frodo became his heir. And Frodo goes on the second adventure, right? So it's almost like, now Gandalf character stayed, like he kept his character. So it's kind of cool that you have this. In some cases, you kind of get that generational aspect, but there's also a cool element, particularly with the elves and the dwarves and the longer lived races, maybe the Numenorians, right? The Dunedain, that they stick around, but the other characters kind of come and go. And I think that's really cool as well. And even an elf who, lives is immortal, I should say. Maybe by the time, so to speak, the campaign ends, your original elf has left for Valinor. But maybe, you're that elf's brother or son or wife, and, you grew up together or whatever like that. And, you didn't want to take the ship, but you wanted to get to know him better through his companions before you made the journey. So like, there's ways that even an immortal creature can kind of have a reason to pass on. So anyways, this usually includes the when, the where, and the what. That should include information that allows the involvement of the company, the why. So there you go. This is just great advice, by the way, for framing anyways. When is it? Where is it? What's going on? And why are you here? Like, why are you involved? Your company, your heroes specifically. If the session is the first one of an adventuring phase, all the elements listed above are now used by the lore master to frame the opening scene. If it's not the first session of play, then the opening scene picks back up where the last one broke. Again, a date is set and a location chosen, and we remind people what the present circumstances are. Well, to play a half-elf Beowulf, you would just be an elf or a human. You would just pick one. I mean, that's to be a half-elf is to literally just pick to be elf or pick to be human. Once a session has started, the gameplay begins transitioning from one scene to another. So, a session is composed of multiple scenes. Each scene, now remember, this is the adventuring phase. This is where the dungeon master, the game master, the lore master is calling the shots. They're the ones, what we call in Magpie language, hard framing the scene. So I get to decide the scene. What's at stake? Why are you here? What's going on? And we're here to find out what happens in this scene. In other words, the players aren't driving the action. And as the game master, I'm not going to set a scene, with you guys just, unless I truly want to, which of you guys just, hanging out, shooting the shit. That's not a good use for the adventuring phase, and that's not a good use for the scene. The adventuring phase, it's my job to challenge you. This isn't a time for, telling us about your character. That's what the fellowship phase is for. Once a session is started, the gameplay transitions from one scene to another, which each scene describing a situation that requires the players to make meaningful decisions. To build the coherent narrative, the lore master frames each scene based on the consequences of the previous one, as well as the choices of the players. And this is just, grade A stuff here, which is, look, the reason we have a game master is so that we can take the kind of, actions that were chosen and the consequences of those actions and commit to it. If we ignore the actions or the consequences of the players, then we're just on a railroad. Each scene can vary from less than an hour of play, a short but meaningful encounter, or it could take up the entire length of the session. A council may take many hours of gameplay to be completed. Between a number of main scenes and secondary scenes, a session of play should not last more than 3 or 4 hours. It's an interesting choice, but I guess it's because they have mechanics that are tied to the session length. And I think that's why they talked about, like, if your session is really long, you might want to do a mid-session break and kind of treat it as if it's like a refresh of a new session. When the time allocated for the game session is up, they face two possible situations, the lore master and the players. If they've reached the end of the narrative arc that sees the involvement of the player heroes, or do we need more time? If it ends without the players reaching a satisfactory conclusion, then the gameplay will resume at a later date with another adventuring phase session. When we get together again, the lore master will start the new session by summarizing the previous one, and we will continue on our way. However, if we've basically wrapped up, then we draw the curtain on the gaming session. The adventuring phase is over, and the session of play progresses into the fellowship phase. Or, if it's late, a fellowship phase will be scheduled to start at the beginning of the next session, depending on available time. I like how practically this is written. Like it's talking about, hey, we're wrapping up at the end of the night. Hey, we have time. Let's do our fellowship phase. Oh, it's getting kind of late. Why don't we call it there, and next time we'll do the fellowship phase. So the idea seems to be that the fellowship phase doesn't have to take an entire session, but it's also not a 5-minute process either, or at least it shouldn't be. So here's a little sidebar on heroic ventures. A truly seasoned adventurer is familiar with the trials and challenges that accompany the dangerous lifestyle of the wandering hero, traveling to distant or unknown places, journeys, fighting dangerous enemies, combat, and meeting new people or important personalities, council. This section offers detailed rules for those activities that adventurers will undertake most often. These are the building blocks of any adventure set in Middle-earth. Okay, so basically, adventuring phase is going to be a series of conversational scenes. However, many scenes will be combat, journeys, council. And for those 3 specific scenes, we have more detailed rules. And thus, we get to the combat rules. There was a ring and a clatter as the company drew their swords. Every age of the world has seen conflict and strife, with the influence of the shadow extending over the land. The choices to confront it without taking up arms grow shorter every day. Thus, combat is a frequent occurrence in the life of the adventurer, frequent but not less tragic. The lives of a member of a company are all at stake, and they consider themselves fortunate if they see the end of a victorious fight without suffering the consequences of the blows they received. On average, now this is good advice here. On average, a company will experience at least one combat encounter in 1 out of every 2 sessions of play. Now that says at least, which is to say that you could have more. But the fact that they're basically saying like, yeah, you're definitely going to see combat at least every other session, should tell you that this is not a hack and slay game. And from what we've seen of the combat rules and the endurance rules, and the fact that a single spear can kill your character on the first blow, should let us know that this is a dangerous world, and that even our great and mighty heroes have to take these things pretty dang cautiously. So yeah. And I'm curious. I mean, obviously you guys are here. We're watching The One Ring. How do we feel about like that kind of pace of play? Would you be happy having a combat? Now, of course, one of the things that I really also encourage is that different types of campaigns can be very different. If you have a group who are all like wardens and captains and champions, you might lean toward, and you might choose a patron like, Balin, and you really lean more into combat. You build your characters towards that. On the other hand, if your characters are all treasure hunters and messengers and scholars, maybe you try to avoid combat as much as you can. Personally, I would rather have 1 or 2 intense combats every, handful of sessions than a bunch of inconsequential combats and do like 2 or 3 or 4 of them a session. That's how I personally feel. I'd rather have it, again, I'm a Vegas guy, you go to Vegas. I put my money, I don't want to enter a poker tournament. I just want to put my money, put it on the roulette wheel, put it on the craps wheel, roll the dice. I either win or I lose, No, Zen, we're talking about combat right now. We're good. Duran's cat says, unless I'm running something like 5e, I generally run 1 combat every other combat already. So this is fine for me. Yeah, there you go. All right. Combat is a dramatic and momentous event for any group of players that should not have its significance dulled by bland repetition. In the books, the episodes featuring fight and battle vary wildly in presentation, set as they are in diverse locations and out of different needs. Before combat even begins, the lore master should make sure that not all battles unfold in the same way, basing the circumstances on the ongoing story and paying particular attention to the plans and preparations of the players and their strategic options. So what I'm picking up here is, number one, we should not just be, you're in a 30 by 30 room, the enemy is over here, the monster is over here, you're over here, and how many D&D fights, how many Pathfinder fights have you had that basically play out in exactly the same way every single time? And the answer is a lot. In fact, in some ways, you kind of want them to play out the same way every single time, because usually that means you won and nothing bad happened to you. But the other thing I think is really interesting here is paying particular attention to the plans and preparations of the players and their strategic options. This, to me, says that this game wants you to think about, essentially, certain elements of combat as war. And when we talk about combat as war, we mean that this game is saying, look, if the players have a great plan, or it's a really shitty plan, or they get caught with their pants down, that should matter. And that should, you should take that into account when the game begins, which I think is really, really cool as well. See here. Jordan says, we had a wide mix of adventure scenes: combat, mystery, investigation, council, a heist, then a combat, then another council. Very cool. And that was the way that our Legend of the Five Rings, we did a Legend of the Five Rings campaign. I want to say it went 5 or 6 sessions. So mini campaign for sure. And we literally had one combat the entire campaign. Everybody's a samurai. They've got swords, they've got all this stuff. And we didn't have a single combat until the final session. So, and everyone thought it was, wonderful and really well paced. And I think a lot of people had a lot of fun. Some people said it was some of the most fun that they'd had in the last couple of years. So I thought that was really, really good. I just don't see myself wanting to play in Middle-earth. I feel shackled by the lore. Now, Dr. Metropolis, the only reason I say this is because I agree with you. And I often say I don't want to play in the IP of a game where, quote unquote, you're stuck. The thing that I think is cool about Lord of the Rings is that most people who consider themselves shackled by the lore, they don't even actually know the lore of Middle-earth. I mean, you might be one of those people who do. But like, the fact of the matter is, there are tens of thousands of years of history of actually more important stuff that happened before even the Lord of the Rings. You see, Frodo taking the ring to Mount Doom, that's not even that important. That wasn't the big victory. Like, in my perspective, this is already small potatoes. And I think there's a natural desire for people to want to play in a game and be the big damn heroes. But this game, I think, is not, and I think this game is you're not trying to be the big damn heroes. I don't know that this adventure has the big damn heroes. In fact, the game this is almost like a meditation on reflecting on the people who aren't the kings and princes of the universe. So I kind of think that that's kind of interesting and cool. Put another way, I would never want to play a Star Wars game. But if I did, I would want it to be like Rogue One. I would never want it to be like, we're a bunch of Jedi running around. That, the Jedi are, that's too high tier. But like a bunch of, scoundrelly nobodies, I can be on board with that. All right. So is the company fleeing from a greater threat and they need to open a way through the enemy's ranks? Are they fighting to protect a place? Are they fighting to protect a person? Are they in a dangerous mountain path? Were they encamped in thick trees? Is it raining? Is the battlefield rough and snow covered? So we're talking about goals. We're talking about protection persons. When we did the dagger splaining on the Battle of Amon Hen, realized that whole battle sequence wasn't kill all the Uruk-hai. It was protect Frodo, let him escape, and ultimately, essentially protect the hobbits, right? Whenever possible, the descriptive details employed by the lore master should have repercussions on how the combat will be resolved. It shouldn't just be flavor. How many opening volleys should be allowed? Should some combatants not be eligible targets? I mean, this is basically telling you, don't just describe this stuff. Make it make a mechanical impact. And I think that's cool. There's a simulationism here at work. So once combat is initiated, the following steps must be applied. 1, opening volleys. 2, close quarter rounds. So the first thing we do is at the start of the battle, the sides are still separated by distance, and there's a brief exchange of ranged weaponry. So before we close, people can use their ranged weapons. The lore master will determine how many to allow, if any, based on the circumstances of the fight as defined by the outset. So this is, again, an example where if your group or the situation or the terrain favors you to be able to maybe do multiple opening volleys, maybe your party with a bunch of bows and throwing axes could be more advantaged. On the other hand, if it was a surprise ambush in the middle of a thick mountains or a thick forest or a blind mountain pass, the lore master may say no opening volleys. And so just the nature of the game. Hey, Dr. Metropolis, thank you.
DR Metropolis tipped $3. Love the first looks as always. This game knows what it wants to be, so I respect. I'm a nobody in real life. Don't need to feel that way in Middle Earth too.
So there is a quote which I like to say, and I want to get it right. I'm going to look it up here. Google, are you failing me? Google's kind of failing me. I want to get this quote right. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, there we go. So drama is ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Okay? The drama of Lord of the Rings doesn't come from Aragorn and Gandalf. The drama of Lord of the Rings comes from Sam and Frodo. So those are ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So, and yeah, I mean, that's kind of at the heart of the movie trilogy for sure, that even the smallest person can change the course of the future. So to me, I think the broader lesson is that, yeah, you're not, the future heir apparent of the reunited kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor. You're not the prince of Mirkwood and you've lived for 5,000 years. You are just somebody, and somebody can make a difference. And I think that's really cool. And Shadram, that's a great quote. You're not a nobody. You're not saving the world, but you are saving something. And you are saving someone. To quote Sam, what we're fighting for is that there's some good in this world and it's worth fighting for. And I think that's cool. I think that's very beautiful. It's important to fight for the small things, not just the big things. Okay. Let's see. Under most circumstances. Oh, hey, look, Dr. Metropolis. I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just saying it's definitely not for everybody. I mean, there's for example, there's some people, Dr. Metropolis, right? Superheroes are extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. And, to a certain extent, that's what D&D has become, right? Extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. But by the definition of that example, that's not dramatic. So, I don't know what it is, but I mean, because the other side of that quote, by the way, is extraordinary people doing ordinary things is comedy. So if ordinary people doing extraordinary things is drama, extraordinary people doing ordinary things is comedy. But then I add, and extraordinary people doing extraordinary things is superheroics. And clearly that is the modern D&D aesthetic. Certainly it's literally the superhero aesthetic, because that's what superheroes are for. Because that's what heroes do. Under most circumstances, all combatants are entitled to at least one volley. But if it is a greater distance, then it might be even more. All volley attacks are resolved as normal. Player heroes carrying a shield double its parry modifier if aware of this incoming attack. A hero advancing to join a confrontation definitely would be. Normally, the volley exchange is resolved with the players launching first, but the lore master could consider the circumstances to favor the opposition. When it's complete, we go to close quarters. So we have this initial period where people can shoot arrows, and people who aren't with ranged weapons don't have them. And this is, we're not playing in a grid-based game. And unfortunately, because of the way most people have played grid-based games, this is never actually a thing anymore. But back in the day, in D&D, you might have a starting encounter distance of 200 feet. So if the creatures that were fighting you didn't have bows, you might light them up before they ever even get into melee range to, attack you with their snarling teeth and claws or whatever. But this game is obviously probably abstract. It's very abstract in its positioning. I do like, though, it's sort of a nod to like, hey, you may not necessarily have it, is that during this phase of the game, right, because you're not actively being assaulted in melee, it turns out having a shield is really good against arrows and thrown weapons. And so if you're basically advancing with your shield raised, which you would be in this, part of the game, you double its parry modifier. That's just a nice little simulationist touch, but it also serves a good game balance point, right? If you have a bow and arrow, you're probably not using a shield. So it's cool that it's kind of a nice counterbalance to like, yeah, I don't have a bow. I'm not shooting anybody. I'm closing as fast as I can. But hey, at least I get to double my parry bonus on this shield. All right. So I do want to bring something up here, which is so this is Foundry. And somebody made this on the One Ring Discord. So this is basically a sort of a combat wheel, combat tracker. Because again, it's not a grid-based game for people who are playing this game. And the idea is, I don't have any actual PCs made, so we'll put in Ronin, and we'll put in Dr. Metro. So like during the initial phase of the game, right, during the open volleys and ranged, we would put, your tokens here. This is on Foundry VTT. And then we would put, the orcs and goblins that we're about to fight, over here. So this is just during the opening volley. It's just kind of a way to place them, kind of to signify that we're not yet closed into the middle of combat melee. And I got to be honest with you, this is the level of sort of zone-based kind of, it's tactical, but it's not like really tactical. I think it's really cool. Like this is just totally, it's totally satisfying for me as just a general takeaway. That's just my 2 cents on that, by the way. Okay. Then, after those opening volleys are complete, we go into close combat rounds. By the way, this might be one of my favorite pieces of art in the entire book. I love the style. It's not over the top, but it's, it's definitely heroic. That orc's getting fucked up. I love the look of the heroic characters. I love the looks of their hats, or their helmets, their shields, their mail, their coats of mail. It looks great. Everything about this image looks awesome. A surprise attack happens when the company is ambushed or when the company succeeds in springing a trap. In all cases, the lore master should consider the circumstances and decide whether a test is required to resolve the situation or not. So, maybe you don't have to resolve a situation. Maybe you don't have to make a test, but you might have to make a test if you have somebody looking out or something like that. But if the company is ambushed because they fail an awareness test or the lore master just decides you're ambushed, player heroes who fail that roll or are otherwise caught off guard will not be able to make an opening volley, nor can they take actions in the first close quarters round. Right. Meanwhile, the monsters, if they are ambushed, they don't get to make opening volleys, and they simply lose 1 dice on all their close combat rounds. Now, that is interesting. So if the monsters are ambushed, they don't get to make opening volleys, and they get a dice penalty. But if the players get ambushed, they don't get to take actions. They don't get to make opening volleys, but they also don't get to take actions at all. Interesting. Oh, I see why. Okay. Because each individual, if it goes back to that fucking Valor and why does it keep doing that? Is that like, must be tied to this next? Okay, it is. Okay. So the reason why they do this is because they don't have the GM make a test for every single enemy. So let's say that the players are ambushed. Each player is going to make an awareness test. If you fail, you're surprised. And if you do succeed, you're not surprised. So it's possible that some party members will be surprised, some party members won't be surprised. But when you ambush the enemies, since the GM isn't rolling for each and every single one of the monsters, basically the monsters are either all surprised or none of them are surprised. So the way they balance that is because it's unlikely that literally every single party member will be, surprised. So they make it a little bit worse on them because of, the reasoning for the balance for there. And then, but if the monsters get surprised, they're all surprised. And so like, they don't get the benefit of the doubt that like, oh, some of them weren't surprised and some of them were surprised, and some of them weren't surprised. So it's either all or none for the monsters. Okay. So we follow through these rounds in close combat. First, the company chooses their stance. Then they choose all combatants in close combat get paired up with opponents. And then we resolve our actions from forward to rearward. Now, when I first read this game, I thought that forward literally meant, like physically charging forward. However, how come this isn't showing the... Let's get another actor in here. Who do we got? We got Darth. We got Darth Malicious here. So I kind of originally thought of this like as like a physical location, like the idea that Dr. Metrop. Now in the fiction and the narrative, I mean, you can definitely describe it as you rushing forward, but it's actually more of like what this, in my opinion, what this should really be called is aggressive, defensive, and open or neutral, or something that maybe neutral sounds a little bit too boring, but open. I think forward should be named aggressive, TLDR, because it's not necessarily that your character is literally physically forward. It's that your character is sort of being reckless, aggressive. You're pushing. You're not really paying attention to your defense. You're just hacking and slashing. You're being really, you're Gimli in the opening rounds of most combats. So obviously defensive makes more sense in that respect. And open, is kind of like you don't get a penalty or, that I like that. Very offensive, defensive, balanced. That also works really well. So this is a super minor nitpick, but I would call it aggressive, defensive, call it offensive, defensive, and then either call it like open or open's probably fine, but neutral, balanced, something like that, rather than calling that forward. I think forward is a little bit of a mistake. So, all player characters select a stance for their heroes at the start of the round, choosing one of the 4 available options. Adversaries do not choose this. This is strictly from the player's hero point of view. I love it. Perfect. Because I don't want this takes to who cares about the monsters? I don't care about the monsters. This is all about the heroes. I love player focused mechanics. I don't care if the orcs are being defensive or offensive. It just eats up time and I don't care about it. And it doesn't matter anyways, because the orcs are going to die. And it's not an interesting decision for me as the game master, because I'm not playing the game the way the players are. So I wish more games did this. TLDR. Anyways, also too, remember it represents the point of view of the players and how they are responding. So we have forward, aka offensive, aka aggressive. We have open, and then we have defensive. And what we can see here in this little example, this zoomed in thing here, is that when you go into the forward stance or the aggressive stance, all of your attack rolls get a bonus die, but all attack rolls against you gain a bonus die. So the closest analog we have to this is the 5th edition Barbarian Reckless Attack, right? I get advantage, everybody gets advantage against me. So, in a perfect world, I'm getting a +1 dice against this orc. It gets a +1 dice against me. But if for some odd reason I'm fighting 2 orcs, well, then they both get +1 dice against me, and I only get, my 1 attack. So, there's a potential here that it could backfire against you for sure. So it's definitely a risky position to be in. Open, on the other hand, doesn't give you a penalty or a advantage. And then our defensive state, close combat attacks against us lose a dice, and our attacks lose 1 dice for each opponent that engages us. All right. So in other words, if we're defensive and we get attacked by 2 soldiers or 2 things, this guy's going to lose a die. This guy's going to lose a die, and we're going to lose 2 dice because we're not really focused on being attacked. Right. I think the balance between these 3 stances is really clear. Nothing, bonus to attack, bonus to getting attacked, penalty to your attack, penalty to being attacked. It's very clear cut. It's very simple. It is 3 is the perfect number of choices to make, I think, to keep a game interesting and still have to make fun choices, reasonable choices. Now, if you were running this 2 or 3 times a night, every session, I do agree with you, it would get boring. But, yeah, I know there's a 4th choice, which is even better, actually, because then it's like 3 + 1. Because it's not 4, it's like 3 + 1, which I think is even cooler. It's like a bonus choice. It feels like a bonus choice. So, yeah, if you're running this every session, twice a session, it would get boring really quick. You'd be like, yeah, okay, I need a little bit more, fiddliness. But if you're only running a combat once every 2 sessions, maybe sometimes you might run a combat, back-to-back sessions. Or maybe there's even some crazy, Helm's Deep session where you run 2 combats or something in a single session. Yeah. But most of the time, you'll have gone a week or 2 weeks between sessions or between combats. This isn't going to get played out that quickly, especially considering how high the stakes are. Because that's the other thing. I go to Vegas. I enjoy it. Not everybody does. The games aren't really that interesting, are they? Hey, did you get 7 on your dice? No? Well, then you didn't win. Did you get 7? Yes. Well, then you won. Hey, I'm going to spin the roulette wheel. Did you hit your number? No, you lost. Did you hit your number? Yes, you won. There's no skill of it, but it's really fun. You know why it's really fun? There's a lot of stakes, and it's quick, and it means a lot. So the thing about a combat, this is kind of why, in my opinion, when people do have fun playing old school D&D, it's because old school D&D feels a shitload like a casino, right? That you're sweating because you're like, if this monster hits me, I'm probably dead. I have 5 hit points. It does D8 damage, or it does D6 damage. If I get hit by anything, there is a 33% chance that I die on the spot instantaneously. And the game doesn't need to be that complex if the stakes are that high. So I think that there's a there's something to be said about, really, really intense games where maybe the mechanics aren't that complicated, but it feels very intense. And so it doesn't need to be complicated. Games like 5th edition and Pathfinder 2 are mostly performative illusionism. And you're going to go through a lot of motions. You're going to click a lot of buttons. You're going to add up a lot of numbers. But as Mark Seifter himself said, your odds of winning a Pathfinder 2 battle are like 99% or greater. Sure, if you're fighting an extreme fight or something, obviously they become lower. But if you're fighting a moderate encounter, maybe even a severe encounter, your odds of winning are at least 95% or greater. And so, yeah, that's really boring unless you make the actions of doing it more entertaining. So that's why you need all those rules and stuff like that. All right. So we get a stance. The first 3 stances are melee. They're close combat. There is a rearward stance, which allows for the firing of ranged combat. So you can fire bows beyond that opening volley. And while anyone can go into any of the 3 close combat stances, you can only pick the ranged combat, the rearward stance, if you meet certain conditions. All right. So player heroes are allowed to assume a rearward stance only if the total number of enemies is not more than twice the number of adventurers in the company. So it's got to be more than double. Not just double, but more than double. If it's more than double, then we can't do it. Additionally, for every hero in rear, there must be 2 in the close combat stances. So if we go back to our Foundry example, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 enemies. So we have 6 players or 3 players. So this is not more than double. But if this was the combat, we now have 7 monsters. We have 3, so double is 6. 7 is more than 6. So in this fight, in this round, no one could assume the ranged stance. So let's say, Dr. Metro goes forward and, Darth and Ronin go back. Okay. And let's say after this round of fighting, for whatever reason, let's say that, an orc soldier has died. And so now when we go to do next round, there are 6 and we have 3. So now Ronin can fall back and go into rear as long as we have 2 people in close combat. If Dr. Metro wants to fall back to ranged combat, we can't do that because now we only have 1 person for each. We would need 4 people in melee combat. So that's really cool. It means that you kind of have to protect. You have to earn your right to keep shooting. You can't just shoot your bow for all time without any penalty or delay. You really have to. And again, this is a fun way of sort of providing some tactical elements to it. Now, so let's say for our opening round here, we'll make it. We'll go back to what we had. We had 2 archers and 5 orcs. I have no idea if this is balanced or not. So we can have someone in rear. So you know what? Let's put Ronin in rear. We'll put Dr. Metropolis in open, and we'll put Darth M in defensive. So that's how we're going to set things up. By the way, these are the stances. So another thing, which I think I missed, is each stance also gives you a new combat option in the game. So if you're in the forward stance, the aggressive stance, not only do you get bonuses to your attacks, but you can also now intimidate the foe. So unless you're being aggressive, you cannot take the intimidate foe action. And what I'm seeing here is that this is one action, but I'm betting that this is an area that is ripe for either homebrew or further expansion in the other books, because I could see it being a lot of fun where, you might have 2 actions that you can only take in forward, 2 actions that you can only take in open, 2 actions that you can only take in defensive, 2 actions that you can only take in ranged. So this is kind of a cool area where you can add a little bit more tactic. If you want a little bit more crunch, a little bit more tactics, you can give a little bit more elements here. So in forward, we gain the ability to intimidate foe. In open, you fight without sparing yourself, but you give proper attention. We can rally comrades, which is we can't do unless we're in the open stance. And then in the defensive stance, in addition to penalizing the attacks coming at us, we can also protect a companion. Lastly, if we are far back, you can attack your adversaries only using ranged weapons, and you can only be targeted by attackers using ranged weapons. And we can also prepare a shot. So very cool. So as we said before, so the monsters don't do anything. The players, decide where we're going to go. So Dr. Metropolis is going to go open. Darth M is going to go defensive. And Ronan is going to fall back and be in range stance. And we can do this because we have at least 2 people. We have 2 people in melee for every 1 person back. And because there's 3 of us, there would need to be at least 7 monsters for us not to be able to do this. There's only 5, so we can do this. Okay, next. Once all the players have determined their stance, all combatants fighting in close combat must engage 1 or more opponents. Players in rear cannot be engaged. Using miniatures, cardboard stand-ups, or tokens can speed this up a lot. As shown in the following paragraphs, how this plays out depends on the number of enemies compared to the total number of player heroes in the company. Since characters will be killed, knocked out, forced to leave, and they can alter the odds, the engagement process will change from round to round. By the way, I also love this piece of art, clearly showing the aggressive stance, the open stance, the defensive stance, and the rearward stance. Great piece of art. Love the look of the armor. Love the realisticness of it. The way that the armor looks, the spears, like this looks like a fucking squad right here. This looks awesome. Okay. Now, there's something important to note. In my book, which I got when the game came out, there is a piece of text on this page that apparently made the game shit. They removed it. It's in the errata. This is a PDF, which represents the 3rd printing of the book. But in the original printing of the book, and apparently in the 2nd printing of the book, there was a paragraph here that said, once you're engaged with enemies, you're stuck being engaged with those enemies until you die or the enemies die. Which meant that once you made these engagements, you were stuck in place. Apparently, they thought that was lame, and I can agree. It makes the fighting very static and very boring. They removed it. So in my PDF, you don't even see this paragraph because they removed it in the errata. But it's on the errata, on the Free League website. But your book may actually say something like, once you're engaged, you can't leave combat. You're stuck there until everybody's dead. And that sounds horrible. So they got rid of that. So you are going to go through this engagement process each round. All right. Now, this is actually another part of the tactical elements because I forgot about this. If there are more enemies than there are heroes, which there clearly are, because we have 5 enemies and we only have 3 heroes. So we have more enemies than heroes. The lore master assigns 1 opponent to each unengaged hero that is in a close combat stance. So I have to remember, I cannot assign people to anyone who's fallen back in rear. Then for every remaining foe, I choose between engaging a hero in a close combat stance who is already engaged or standing back, possibly using a ranged weapon. Enemies who stay back to use a ranged weapon can attack any player in the fight. So I can already see that I've made a mistake here, my players. Now I should note that there's a little element here, which is described in the book too. Heroes can be engaged by up to 3 human-sized creatures or 2 large creatures. Is that right? Yes. Player heroes can be engaged in close combat by up to 3 human-sized creatures or 2 large creatures. Conversely, apparently on that it's that fan-made thing. Conversely, up to a maximum of 3 player heroes can go up against a human-sized opponent, while up to 6 can engage a large opponent, such as a troll. Now, what does this mean? Well, what it means is that when we go to do our engagement, because my monsters went first, or I have more monsters, I get to make the agreement assignment. So what I'm going to do now, obviously, Darth is in a defensive stance. So I don't really want to engage Darth because I'm going to get a penalty to attack him. So I have to put somebody. So I'm going to put somebody on Doc Metro. Now I have to put somebody on an unengaged hero. So I'm going to put him on Darth M. Now I can't put someone on Ronin. So for the remaining 3 monsters, I can have them stand back or assign onto somebody else, up to a maximum of 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my 3rd Orc Soldier onto Doc Metro, because I don't want to put him into the defensive guy, because I'm going to get a penalty to my attack. I want to attack the guy who's not defensive. And then I'm going to leave my Goblin Archers back, and they're going to be able to shoot their bows. So this is kind of a mistake, because knowing that the way that the numbers broke out, Dr. Metro probably should have been defensive, because that would have forced the Orc Soldiers only to attack people in defense. So that's kind of interesting. So, but this is the way we had it, right? So Orc Soldier goes here. Orc Soldier has to go here. Now I can bring this Orc Soldier here, and we'll have 2 Goblin Archers standing back. Oh, Mark Clore, you know what? You are very smart. That could be remedied with Protect Companion. I don't recall. I don't know what that does. I know it's something here. Actually, we can see it here on the sheet. You can make an athletics roll. Attacks versus a companion in a close combat stat suffer a -1 die per success and icon. Okay. So yeah, maybe there is a cool option here. So let's see what we can do here. Mark Clore, that's a great point. So that's what happens when there's more monsters or more enemies than player heroes. But what about a situation where the heroes outnumber the enemies, or they're equal? So if the round, because it could change, sees the company outnumbering its foes, or at least matching the number, then the players choose the engagement. Player heroes in a close combat stance choose an unengaged adversary to face from among those introduced by the lore master as eligible targets. If there are not enough free enemies to engage, player heroes in close combat left without an adversary must engage an enemy already engaged by another hero. If one or more of the company is in Rearward, it is possible that there will be enemies left after everyone in close combat has engaged an adversary. If this happens, then the lore master chooses whether the spare enemies will engage a hero who is already fighting in close combat or stand back to attack with a ranged weapon. So let's play this a little differently. If I'm reading this right, so we're going to get a new character in here. We're going to get Shadram. Shadram's going to join the party. Welcome, Shadram. Shadram has joined the party. So let's say that there's only 2 Orc Soldiers and 2 Goblin Archers. Maybe there were, by the way. Maybe, originally there were more Goblin, there were more Orc Soldiers, right? But we killed them. So in round 1, right, we had 6 monsters. Okay. Now 2 Orcs are dead. So now we have 4 players. And we have 4 monsters. So we are going to decide where they get assigned, right? So we could go, Ronin stays back. Maybe Dr. Metro goes forward. Darth M goes defensive. And Shadram goes open. And then we get to pick where the monsters go. So we could go, hey, we're going to put the Goblin Archer on Dr. Metro. We're going to put the other Goblin Archer on Shadram, and we're going to put one of the Orc Soldiers on Darth, who's in defensive stats. So now all 3 of our heroes have gotten based up. That leaves our Orc Soldier. Now he can't, because we are all based up, now I, the lore master, get to decide where we're going. He might not even have a range attack. He could stay back and used a range attack, but the players have put me in a situation where I'm basically going to put him into melee. And I decide to put him into combat with Dr. Metro because I really want to, take advantage of the fact that I get a bonus to hit him. So now we've set up this situation. So the players have kind of gained the initiative. Now they get to call the shots, right? So outnumbering your opponent feels awesome. Like you get to make all the shots and call all the shots. That's really cool. Alternatively, right? Now look at this. We've got 2 orc soldiers on Dr. Metro who's in forward. Well, maybe because we have the advantage, we bring Ronan into defensive. We bring Shadram up to aggressive. We put the first archer on Dr. Metro, we put the second archer on Shadram, and then we put the 2 orc soldiers against Darth and Ronan. So now we've put both of their archers into melee with our aggressively slanted warriors, and we put both of their orc soldiers onto 2 of our defensive characters. And this feels like tactical, strategic victory to me. I don't know about you, but it feels like victory to me. It feels like we're making important decisions that are going to have an impact to the game. And this is enough for me. I don't know. This is enough game for me to feel pretty happy about the way that these odds are changing and all this other stuff. So anyways, I think that's pretty cool. We're going to bring it up. We're going to bring some soldiers back here. But okay, so we have Ronan falls back. Shadram, Dr. Metro will take forward, Shadram will take open, and Darth will take defensive. And then I have the outnumber. So I'm going to put a guy here, I'm going to put a guy here, and I'm going to put a guy here. And then I'm going to put a guy here, and then these guys are going to stay back. Okay, so that's what it looks like. This is what our assignment looks like after round 1. So Dr. Metro in an aggressive stance is based up on 2 orc soldiers. Shadram's on 1 orc soldier. Darth's on 1 orc soldier. We got 2 archers falling back. Okay. And I like that that'll change every round. And I could see why if you were playing this game and you couldn't make those change adjustments each round, that seems like that would be so boring. And Shadram, by the way, says, can confirm it was lame. So apparently Shadram played without that house rule or without that update to the errata. All right, so the actions of all combatants are now resolved with the members of the company going first. After the heroes have taken all their actions, the lore master gets, okay, so the players always go first. That's important because that could also change the math. You can kind of take a risk. Hey, we're going to put that person in with that monster because we think that they can kill them. When it's the company's turn to act, all players go in stance order. The players in forward go first, then open, then defensive, then rearward. When it is the player's turn to act, they must choose 1 main action and 1 secondary action, which they can do before or after their main one. And obviously, there's no movement. A main action is usually your full attention, like a combat roll or a attack roll or a combat task. Secondary actions are simpler tasks. Main actions, other than attacking or performing your combat task, might be recovering your position after you've been knocked back, recovering your weapon or helm or shield that was previously dropped. No, these are main actions. Carrying a fallen comrade to safety, moving across the battlefield. Oh, apparently there is movement. I mean, maybe it's just narrative movement because like the stance doesn't matter. There's no like grid. Secondary actions include advancing or retreating while fighting, trying to locate. Okay, yeah, so it's more like abstract stuff. Drawing a weapon, removing a helm, or dropping a shield so you can reduce load. Combat tasks include a number of non-combat options, but players can always surprise the lore master by proposing something unusual and unexpected. This is usually a sign that they are enjoying the game, and the lore master should encourage it by allowing the action whenever possible. What a great sentence. Combat tasks, again, people might come up with something that isn't in the game, but hey, you should encourage this because it means that they're paying attention and they care. The factors to consider when resolving actions other than the combat actions described in this chapter are time, difficulty, and consequences. Can you perform this action in 1 round, or will it take more time? The lore master must decide, but most people time you should consider a round to last maximum 30 seconds. Does the action require a die roll? If so, both success and failure should have clear consequences. When it's the enemy's turn to act, the lore master chooses the actions again in stance order. The enemies who stood back to attack with ranged weapons are resolved last. Yes, Beowulf. I dropped my load. Bob, probably. Actually, it'd probably be Smith, actually. Player heroes attack their enemies as a main option. A main action. We make an attack roll. It uses your strength TN, modified by the parry rating of the targeted enemy. Okay, interesting. So remember, we learned in the game that dice rolls can be modified. Let's see here. I don't know what that means. Is that dice? Good night, Ronan. I actually don't know what that means. Does it describe this? The difficulty of all attack rolls, it says as seen on page 65, but 65 didn't describe that. The is based on your TN, modified by the parry rating of the target enemy. I see. So it actually modifies your TN. It increases your target number. So you might be rolling a 16 instead of your 14. All right, I don't love that. It's very, I mean, it's straightforward enough, and it makes it so that, you know, but the modifying the TN feels really bad. It feels like something I don't want to be doing. Right, when the monster attacks you, it's against your parry score. That's fine. I would think it would be like some sort of penalty dice, considering that that's a thing. That's weird, because this is the only instance in the game where we modify the TN. Interesting. Okay. Shadram says most enemies have a 0 parry rating. It's only skilled fighter monsters that have a parry rating. That makes me feel better about it, because then it feels like a special thing, and it kind of does feel like a kick in the dick, which is kind of nice. I don't know. I'd have to feel that one out. My sense is that I don't like it, and I wish it was just you lost dice to your attack, I guess. But then, right, like parry 1 means that you get, you know, or whatever. Well, right, but maybe that's, you know, it's basically parry 0, parry 1, or parry 2. Like, that's it. Like, that parry 2 would be like an extremely highly skilled, you know, combatant where you're losing 2 whole dice. Because, yeah, I mean, losing a die is equivalent to losing 3.5, you know, so obviously parry going up by 1 or 2 is not nearly equivalent to going up by 3.5. But I would rather just simplify that and just have it be with dice and always have the players going against their TN. And the game gave us this option to essentially make something more difficult by penalizing them with dice. And so why wouldn't we just use that here? And like, do we really care about the microscopic level of precision required for parrying? Like, okay, the Great Orc Chief has a parry of +3. which basically is a penalty die. You know, the Great Orc Bodyguard is a parry of +2. So, yeah, maybe we're being a little bit, you know, maybe it's a little bit more powerful, obviously, if they're losing a whole dice. And then, you know, and so the real problem is with a monster like the Orc Soldier, which is a parry of +1. Well, guess what? We'll just make that 0. Who cares? You know, you're modifying the TN by 1. 0. Do I care about that level of precision? No. No, not really. Like, if it's 1, it's 0. If it's 3, it's a die. If it's 2, that's where you probably have the, you know, the most, you know, the most element of, you know, do you go up and give it 1? Do you go down and give it 1? Do you, you know, calculate some other change? You probably would be like, if you gave it parry 0, you might want to give him a little bit more endurance. But I think I would much rather prefer this. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, make one of your D6s a D3. Yeah, baby, let's go. Cinnabos, I mean, I'm serious when I say I would rather do that, because I love the idea of you roll against your TN, full stop. That is powerful. When you start having to modify it, I don't like it. I don't like it. You cannot possibly be serious. There's no way that you care about, you know, 5%. Ooh, that's a good point, Cinnabos. If you're weary, the D3 is automatically gone. I love that. Shadram says bonus dice that are not D6 could work. All right. I mean, think about it, right? Like, it's a D3. So if you're weary, it's automatically a 0, which is kind of cool. And then the D3 will never have a 6, so it'll never have the success symbol either. So it's kind of cool. That's kind of a neat little mechanic there, Cinnabos. I kind of love it. I'm not even kidding. Beowulf says, it's funny because before I knew about parry on the monsters, I wasn't loving it. It was a big turnoff for me. Once I learned the monsters could modify it, it was sold. Right. Whereas I'm disgusted. I'm okay with you know, because again, in the action phase, you know, when we're making tests, they talk about your ability to modify the character's role by, you know, applying penalty dice. So I'm all for that. But in fact, one of the things that I actually like a lot, if I'm understanding the monsters or the game math correctly, is the highest stat you can have is an 8, which means that the lowest TN you can get is a 12, which means that unless you have bonus dice, right, you can never succeed with your D12 unless you roll the Gandalf rune. And so when you get down to 0 bonus dice, it's basically like saying you have a 1 in 12 chance, you know, of succeeding, which I like. I think that's cool. Phil, I completely agree with you. Same for D100 games that modify TNs. What's the point? One of the reasons I really respect Dragonbane is a D20 roll low. And you look at your skill says 17, and it says, did you roll 17 or lower? Then you succeeded. Is your skill 12? Did you roll 12 or lower? And it never changes that. Now, you might roll with advantage, you might roll with disadvantage. But yeah, you know, it's makes when you play a D100 game and you're like, yeah, this is so convenient, so good. It's like my difficulty is 73, and you're like, okay, well, modify it. And then it's like, what are we even doing here? Now it's just DC but backwards. So I absolutely love static DCs, and I don't even mind that you can modify the difficulty via penalty dice. But changing them, I think, is terrible. So Phil, I agree. I like the parry modifier in theory, but it takes away from the point of a TN. Yes, I as a nod to the simulationism of inherent in this game. I like that it is harder to hit an orc guard than it is to hit a goblin archer. That is fine. And I think that's great. That I agree. That makes sense. You know, in some games like Dungeon, you know, PBTA, I wouldn't care. But in this game, I do care because armor is a thing, and we talked about how cool it is, and orc should, you know, be better fighters and better, you know, fighter than a goblin. Cool. Awesome. Totally reasonable. I just don't like that you have this really cool, these are the only 3 DCs you will ever need to know, is your heart, your mind, and your body, or whatever they're called. Wits, heart, and strength. And then you say, well, but sometimes it'll be this and sometimes this. You're used to your D6s going up and down. I think that's fine. So, Jake says, I sometimes wonder if Derek and Beowulf touch, would they explode like matter and antimatter? And Beowulf says, I will admit, one of the worst parts about Pendragon combat is listening to the players trying to figure out their modifiers in combat each round. Using advantage and disadvantage would be so much better. And I don't want to do numerical modifiers. Anyways, so I don't like this, but I would probably just immediately house rule it and come up with basically make parry penalty dice to your attack. Basically, that's how I would do it. For +2, we'd have to figure. Oh, +2, I think we said would probably be like a D3 or something like that. It would turn a D6 into a D3, which I think is cool. Anyways, where were we? Right. Okay. Resolving attacks. All right. So the difficulty of all attack rolls against a player are used against your parry score, which makes sense. Because again, it's player focused in that respect. The monsters don't have a TN. They just roll against your parry score. A successful attack roll inflicts damage on its target in the form of endurance lost based on the weapon used and may inflict special damage types based on the quality of success of the roll. Finally, attacks may cause long-lasting injury if a piercing blow is scored. A well-placed blow always has unpleasant consequences, whether the hit is successful in producing long-term damage, but regardless, a combatant will be disoriented by pain, be winded, or sent reeling. Whenever an attack roll succeeds, they suffer an immediate endurance loss equal to the damage used. So, no rolling for damage. Your weapon, just does a certain amount of damage. So, if you're unarmed, it does 1 point of damage. If you're using a great axe, it does 7. If you're using a long sword, it does 5. So that's how much damage it does. Full stop. If you hit, that's how much endurance they lose, right? That's what the damage does. You lose endurance. Okay. Note that at this point, armor hasn't entered the equation yet. It's just, right, because we're not actually hurting them. Hurting them is represented by something different. This is just, being knocked about because you weren't able to parry their blow. Adversaries do not normally become weary due to endurance loss, but instead, they are just killed at 0 endurance. Whereas players also go unconscious at 0 endurance. But if your endurance score, if you take enough damage and your endurance score goes below your load score, you become weary. And if it goes to 0, you drop unconscious. Knockback. Sometimes an attack is so powerful that a fighter prefers to roll with the punches and reduce the force by giving ground. Once per round, a player hero can half the loss caused by a successful attack by choosing to be knocked back. Now, we don't physically knock them back. Instead, they have to spend their next action recovering their fighting position. And again, this is a player-facing rules. Monsters can't choose to do this. So this is kind of like Dragonbane, where you can give up your next action by choosing to sort of evade and take half damage. So if for some odd reason a monster hit you for like 10, you could choose to basically be like, kind of almost being forced back from the blow. You only take 5 damage instead of 10, but you basically miss your next turn. You don't get to make it's your main action. You could technically still make a secondary action, but you won't be able to basically make an attack in your next round. So it's kind of like a way of like reacting once per round, but you lose your next action, which is fine. Mark Lora says a consequence of doing parry as penalty dice would be that you also reduce the chance of rolling elf runes, which I think may cause effects even on a miss. Oh, interesting. No, I think you have to succeed. Normally, you have to succeed in order to hit, but maybe we'll see. Yeah. They say that a combatant that strikes the first blow, if they strike hard enough, may destroy. If a successful attack produces one or more success icons, you can trigger them. So you have to succeed first. So even if you roll a bunch of success icons but miss, then it doesn't work anything. Multiple icons can trigger different results or the same one multiple times. Oh, interesting. Okay, so this is cool. So remember the 6 on our D6 has these special icons on it. You don't really need to remember that they have special icons. It's just the 6s. So if you roll a bunch of 6s, you can spend them to do kind of cool bonus attack, bonus things. One is heavy blow. Any weapon can do this. You have hit your opponent with great force and precision. Spend one of these icons to inflict. Remember, you can do these multiple times. Nice. Spend one icon to inflict your adversary an additional loss of endurance equal to your strength rating. Raise that loss by an additional 1 if you're using a two-handed weapon. So, if you remember our dwarf that we made last weekend, he had a 7 strength. So if he's using his great axe, he does 7 damage, 7 loss of endurance with a hit from his great axe. But if he rolls a 6 on the D6, he can spend it. His strength was 7, and this is a two-handed weapon. Two-handed. He would add 8 points of damage. So it would go from doing 7 to 15. That's a lot. And if I rolled 2 of those icons, I could add 16 to this. And this 7 would become 23. Yikes. That's a lot. Heavy blow is very strong in my experience. Maybe too strong. I don't know, Phil. I don't know. I mean, that's something I have no idea. So, Phil, I'm going to sort of, bow to you on that respect. I think personally, I'm fine with that. Let the fights be over quickly. Remember, monsters die at 0. And unless something's really weird, I don't know how the balancing rules in this game work. And quite frankly, I don't know if I would care, even if I did. Most of the time, I'm going to probably have a situation where the players are outnumbered, And if we take a look at this orc soldier. Do we have stats for the orc soldier? Oh, maybe I have the stats for the orc soldier actually right here. He's got 12 endurance. So, if Gimli or whatever, Bavos hits him with the axe, spends one of his success icons, and takes him out right away, I'm fine with that. I think that's cool. I mean, it's just an orc, I mean, they get chopped down by the dozens, They're not minions in that they have like 1 hit point. But I'm okay if the players are taking these people out, one chop at a time. Especially the really strong dwarf dude with a massive axe. I think that's really cool. And I love that, in fact, spending the success icon is more damage than, your axe did normally. Also, I love input randomness. Like choosing these after the fact is pretty good. I mean, generally speaking, Phil, when you're in combat, dealing damage is usually a good idea. So I wouldn't be surprised to see. All right, so the next one is fend off. You exploit your attack to place yourself in an advantageous position. Spend 1 success icon to modify your parry rating for the round by 1 if you're using an axe, 2 if you're using a sword, and 3 if you're using a spear. So to your point, Phil, if I'm fighting against one monster, I would probably never use fend off. But if there was a situation where it looked like where it looked like this. All right, I've got to base everybody up. And I'm like, okay, Dr. Metro gets one. Shadram gets one. Darth gets one. All right, I really want to kill Darth. I can put a maximum of 3 monsters on him. I'm going to put 3 monsters on him. Great. Cool. Also, my Goblin Archers are probably going to be shooting at you. If Darth rolls and gets a couple successes and Darth is using a spear, I could totally see Darth being like, I'm going to raise my parry by 6. That's a huge increase. And I also love that the weapon that is the best at being defensive is the motherfucking spear, because it should totally be the motherfucking spear. So that's cool. And I mean, it's not going to be, if you're trying to kill the monster, no, you don't want to do this. But like, again, in the situation that we were just showing, I would hope Darth is using Fend Off, because otherwise he's going to be in real trouble. Or, something to that effect, if he gets it. Anyways, very cool. Next, Pierce. Now, this is only usable for bows, spears, and swords. It's Pierce. You have hit a less protected part of the adversary's body. Spend 1 success icon to modify. So you can only do this, by the way, after you've hit already. To modify the feat die, that's the D12, by 1 if you're using a sword, 2 if you're using a bow, and 3 if you're using a spear. Wait a second. Is spear the best weapon? Now, why do I want to do this? I already hit. It goes up to a maximum of 10, and it triggers a piercing blow. Okay. So any attack roll which rolls a 10 or a Gandalf rune makes a piercing blow, which could potentially instantly kill the creature. So basically, if you have a spear or a bow and you roll a couple success icons and you rolled like a 7, you hit. Now you can virtually treat it like you rolled a 10, which means that your attack actually, so this doesn't do anything unless you can raise it to a 10. And with a spear, that's really, wow, spears are kind of sweet. Holy shit. Wow. Is this a game where the spear is actually like the best weapon? All right, lastly, shield thrust. You bash your opponents with your shield, pushing them back. If your strength is greater than your target's attribute, their strength, you can spend 1 icon to push them back. They get a penalty, losing 1 die for the length of the round. In the rare case that the special damage is triggered multiple times, it must be employed to push back different opponents. Okay. So if you have a shield, you can basically give people penalty dice. Obviously, a penalty dice is like worth minus 3.5. It's also nice because when you give people penalty dice, they lose the ability to roll 6s. And 6s are what allow them to do, like, the crazy shield thrusts and heavy blows and piercing and fending off. So in a piercing blow, during combat, fighters can see their stamina slowly whittle away as exhaustion and blows suffered take their toll. Or they can be suddenly and unexpectedly cut down by a vicious stroke. Anytime you get a successful attack, it might inflict a piercing blow. It's when you roll a 10 or a Gandalf rune. That's 2 on a D12. That means 1 in 6 attacks is going to be a piercing blow. Characters hit by a piercing blow must immediately roll the D12 plus a number of bonus D6 success die equal to the value from your armor. The target number for this is the injury rating of the weapon used by the attacker. Oh, okay. So our big, huge axe, right, has an injury rating of 20. So the TN, the DC, is a 20. So if you get a piercing blow from a great axe, you might be, if you're a monster, you might be dead. Whereas a piercing blow from a cudgel is much less likely to instantly kill you if you have some halfway decent armor. Very cool. By the way, still putting some respect on the spear. If you're holding a spear two-handed, it's DC 16, which isn't bad. But here's where the sword is kind of cool, because the sword is DC 18 if it's two-handed. So the sword is a little bit more, like, if you land that stabbing, killing blow, the sword is a little bit more lethal. But nothing beats the axe for raw lethality, which I love. Very cool. Very cool. Man, spears can also be thrown. What up? And they can be used one-handed or two-handed. What up? Spear MVP. Interesting. The dagger is the brawling proficiency, but you can pierce with it as if it was a sword. Are there slings? I don't see slings. The only thing they have is bow and great bow. That's the only ranged attack that they have. They do note that unarmed includes throwing stones, but it cannot cause a piercing blow. Although a sling should totally be able to cause a piercing blow, right? You hit them. No whips. Not maybe the monsters get them, but this is all they get. I mean, it's a very short list of weapons. Honestly, I'm surprised that they have cudgel and club. Like, do we really need, these two things? Interesting. Very cool. By the way, I thought this was going to be council and combat and thing. It looks like it's just going to be combat. Where were we? Okay, if the roll fails, then they receive a wound. Now remember, from a player hero, if we take a wound, we could potentially instantly die. But if we get a second wound, then we're in real trouble, and we start to basically bleed out and die. And as a reminder, here's how much protection these things give us. So when we're trying to defend against that, like if an orc came at us with a great axe, we'd have to make a TN 20 check. So it's a D12 plus maybe a couple of dice from our armor. So if our dwarf, who's wearing a coat of mail and helm, they're adding 5 dice. So they have a pretty good shot at it. Wounds. Most adversaries are killed outright when wounded. So if you do manage to land a piercing blow on an enemy, even if they're at quote-unquote full hit points, endurance, they just die. Players can be wounded once, but if they get hit a second time, now they're basically dying. Players who are wounded a second time see their endurance drop to 0, they fall unconscious, and they are now dying. Players, so if you get wounded the first time, you have to roll immediately on this D12 chart. If you roll a Eye of Sauron, you fall unconscious immediately and are now dying. So first shot of the fight starts, and a goblin archer goes and rolls really high and does a piercing blow, and you fail your armor check, or you're not wearing armor. You get wounded. You roll the Eye of Sauron. You immediately fall unconscious as if you'd been wounded twice, and you're dying. And you could potentially die right there on the spot. That's unlikely to happen, but not like 1% unlikely to happen. So the game is pretty dangerous in that respect. Armor is a good thing, I guess. But it does weigh a lot. If you are dying, you have to get healed with a successful healing roll within an hour or so, and long enough for your, the little ones. They took the little ones and then die. If the roll is a success, the life has been saved, and they come back to their senses in about an hour at 1 endurance. If they're wounded, they must add in 10 days to the time required for their injury to mend. Finally, they get a scar. So probably good to have somebody who's reasonably proficient in healing. By the way, the difficulty of an attack can be affected by a range of factors, such as shooting an arrow at long range. Note, we don't have anything in this game for range. It could be dark. It could be a rainstorm. You could be knee-deep in icy water or mud or difficult terrain. On the contrary, you may have an advantage. You might have the high ground. You might be standing in a vantage position to pepper your enemy with arrows, or you might have your flanks protected by natural barriers. Using the examples provided by the tables over Leaf, the lore master can set a level of complication or advantage, imposing a bonus or penalty on attack rolls made by a combatant in the fight. What is the overleaf? Now, by the way, look at this. Complications. If you're moderately hindered, you lose a die. If you're severely hindered, you lose 2 dice. If the attacker has an advantage, they gain 1 dice. If they have a great advantage, they gain 2 dice. I mean, this is basically this is like what Parry is, basically, right? Because raising the DC, right, is functionally equivalent to, and obviously raising the DC by 1 is not the equivalent of losing a dice. Agreed. But I don't know. I mean, they're basically clearly already indicating that this is an option for you to do this. And it's almost like, yeah, my attack is severely hindered by how awesome this guy is at fighting. So like, I could raise his parry rating by 5, or I could just lose 2 dice and use the TN I've been using since the beginning of time. I don't think it makes a difference. Obviously, there's more volatility, but yeah, I don't know that it makes a huge amount of difference, because even if you roll a bunch of 6s on your D6s, if you still fail because their parry rating was too high, the D6s do nothing. Now, I don't know enough about the game to know that this is completely, neutral. Obviously, we've talked before, like, 1 and 2 is kind of a weird state because, I mean, the thing is, Phil, if the enemy had a high parry, let's say you normally need a 15 to hit your foe because your strength is 5. Well, if their parry was 3, that 15 would go to an 18. So now you got to roll an 18. So you got to roll a higher number. So you might want to go into an aggressive stance to get the bonus die so you have a chance of hitting 18. But that's the same thing if I say, hey, you're going to lose a die. And you go, oh, okay, I'll go into aggressive stance to get a bonus die. I'm like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. That way it cancels each other out, and you're just rolling against your 15. But that's functionally the same. I don't know. Yeah, okay, that's what you meant. All right. I mean, I suppose the only exception is if their parry is really high, it limits your, if their parry is really high and you acquire a bunch of bonus dice that otherwise would be penalized, you guess you have more chances to roll 6s. So I just don't want to do any sort of non-dice math. Is it easy? Of course it is. That's what bonuses and attack rolls are. So, I mean, it's the same way that you could make this game. This game could have just made everything DC 20. And it could have made everything DC 20. And then you just add your strength rating to all of your rolls. That's literally the same thing, right? Because right now, if my strength is 5, I have to roll a 15. Well, guess what that really actually is? Everything's DC 20. You're just auto adding in the fact that you always add 5 to your strength rating. So why do they have you do that? Because it's one less step. That's why. And doing these little math calculations is silly. Is it easy? Yeah, but and I think just using the dice become the language of the game, right? When you spend hope to gain a dice, right? When you spend 2 hope to gain 2 dice if you're inspired. The game is already in this language of dice. So why not just keep talking in the language of dice and dice pools? I'm not talking about whether it's difficult to add 1 to a number of 14. No, that's not difficult. Hey, their parry rating is 4. All right, well, I needed a 13. I guess I need a 17 now. Yeah, I can add 4 to 13. That's not difficult. It's just not elegant. That's all. And elegance is an important part for me for games. It's not an important part for you, Beowulf. I know, because I've seen all the different systems that you jam into it. I also agree. I think that process of building your pile and taking dice out as you get a benefit, putting dice in as you get or taking dice out as you get a penalty, adding dice in as you get a benefit. I think that's it's like a sacred moment. And then there's this knowledge that you have that everything that you need to know from this point forward is right there in that dice result. You don't have to worry about, thinking about whether or not is there some miscellaneous bonus I forgot or whatever. It's all right there in the dice. It's like when the old lady casts the bones and the runes, she doesn't go, oh, and of course you get a +2 bonus to your rune roll. No, it's there. The future is being told right there on the table in the runes. And that's what I like about a dice pool system. Is it everything that you need to know is there physically on the table. I mean, we kind of made fun of it, but like Daggerheart does the same thing with the idea of adding in the little plastic beads to your dice roll, right? Which is, again, silly, but it means that what you see is what you get. Nice, GM Scott. The bones tell me nothing. Do you have any love for this child? I do, High Aldwin. The bones have spoken. Willow Offgood, for the safety of this village, you must take this child beyond the great village, along the great river, to the Daikini crossroads. Praise the bones. And the bones tell me that this expedition needs a leader. Oh, no, is it? Who will protect our brave hero on his journey? I will. Ah, Migosh, a good choice. I'll go. Funkar, not Funkar. He's the best warrior in the village. Funkar, step back. What this expedition needs is a leader. And what the bones tell me is that leader is you, Burglecut. Funkar! What's your problem, son? What do you mean? Before, when I held out my hand, you hesitated. No, it's stupid. No, please. To pick my own finger. That was the right answer. You lack faith in yourself. More than anyone in the village, you have the capability to become a great sorcerer. All right, anyways. Yes, I may have seen that movie. I don't know, 100 times. Dagger explained that. Oh, Willow? Oh, hell yeah. I don't even need the movie playing Zen Bullet. We can do that thing scene by scene, line of dialogue by line of dialogue, and we don't even need it. There you go, Beowulf. That's a Vin. That's a Vin explanation. All right. I love that most monsters are going to be killed when you wound them. I mean, I'm sure like trolls and maybe some cool Uruk-hai captains don't, but I like that, that's cool. If the lore master deems it appropriate, a player hero can make a battle roll, that's a skill, as their main action for the round to impose or remove a complication or to gain an advantage based on the description of the battlefield and the tactical choices of the combatants. So this is basically this game's way of saying, look, your players are going to want to do some crazy shit, but just, kind of map it to, is it moderate hindered, severely hindered, moderate advantage, greater advantage? Figure it out, map it to something, and go with that. Give them the bonus, use the language of dice, and it'll work out. I would love to talk to the game designers here and be like, why did you just get so close and then just abandon it? All right. So we know that we can attack, but also each stance gives us an additional benefit in that we can perform a specific combat maneuver that we can only do in that task. So if we are in the aggressive forward stance, we can choose to intimidate foe, causing them to waver, break, or flee. It's our main action. We don't get to attack. And we make an awe roll. On a successful roll, their morale has been shaken. All opponents with might 1, which is probably like, the little guys, are made weary for the entire round. Remember, the players always go first. If the roll produces a success icon, then it's all adversaries with might 2. And if you get 2 success icons or more, it's everyone. So this means that when you go to the aggressive stance, instead of attacking, you might choose to do a enemy-wide AoE debuff. Now, unfortunately, if you roll just success, it only is going to affect the little guys. But if you roll with a bonus success icon or 2, you could potentially affect all of them. Then Bullet, thank you for the $5. I'm not sure if I want to encourage it, but this is for the Willow love. I appreciate it. Hey, look at that. We're up to $15 of Super Chat. We're 10% of the way there. Shadram says, every player in my game was always hunting for piercing blows. Dealing damage felt like a failure to them. I could see that happening, especially with a certain type of build. All right, so this is awesome. This means that our aggressive stance gives us the ability to do potentially an AoE debuff for the entire round. Rally comrades. So this, if we're in the middle stance, the open stance, we can rally. They are heedful of their surroundings and may attempt to rally their comrades when the battle is wearing them out. Only one hero can choose to rally in any given round. So only one player can heal each round. To do so, the acting player makes an enhearten. Okay, never mind. It's a buff. They make an enhearten roll, which is awesome. On a successful roll, all members of the company fighting in a forward stance gain +1 dice on their attack rolls in the following round. If the roll produces a single success icon, then all those fighting in the open stance gain the same bonus. And if it's 2 or more, it's everyone in close combat. So what's cool about this is like a setup move because it's the next round. So you almost like rally everyone, and then the next round, everybody piles into forward, right? And then they're all going to get a bunch of bonus dice, which is really, really cool. Because you're like setting them up this round for the bonus next round. I think that's awesome. And then this was mentioned earlier. What about defensive? In defensive stance, you can choose to protect your companion. Remember, the players all go first. They can choose to protect another hero in combat stance. To do so, you make an athletics roll as your action for the round. On a success, the next attack aimed at them loses 1 dice and loses additional dice for every success icon that you roll during this. So if like the big troll is going to attack your one player, you can, and you know this because the assignments have already been made. The player who's been in defensive stance, maybe they were going to attack, but now they choose to protect their ally, and they could potentially make that troll lose a dice, 2 dice, maybe 3 dice. By the way, I want to point out, what this could clearly have said is that the player parry rating goes up by 2 or 3, plus another 3 for each success icon did it. But they didn't do it. They used the language of dice because that's the language of this game. That's why I don't understand what they did with parry. So that's on the chopping block for house rule. Oh, yeah, right. You get one in rear, too. So if you fell back, it's because you wanted to shoot your bow. They make a scan roll. On a successful roll, you gain 1 dice on your next ranged attack, plus another die for each success icon. Oh, okay. So you can basically charge up next round to make a super attack. And the reason why that's cool is because normally this kind of action isn't really that useful because getting a really high attack roll doesn't really make you do any more damage. But if you're rolling a bunch of extra D6s, you're going to probably potentially trigger multiple 6s, which means you might be in a situation where you can land a heavy blow or a piercing blow, especially if you're using a bow or throwing a spear. And that might be worth it because you could potentially drop a monster who's at full hit points. So this is probably one of the few games where it feels like aiming is really worth it. I mean, there could be a monster who's really hard to hit, potentially. And you might just really need to, literally get all the bonuses, successes you can. But I love the idea of using this, not because you need to hit or not, but because you want to roll a bunch of extra 6s so that you get a couple 6s and can use them to do a really sick piercing shot or to do a really sick heavy blow. Can you do a heavy blow with range? That's a great question. Maybe you can. But piercing shot, that would be definitely what I would be aiming for, to be clear. Heavy blow is with any weapon. Fend off is only close combat. Pierce is bows, spears, and swords. And shield thrust is with shields. So there you go. So as an archer, I might be like, you know what this is, right? Imagine there's like, I don't know, maybe there's some like high armor, high endurance creature. And rather than try to whittle through its massive pool of endurance, you're like, its armor is weak at the neck and under the arm. And you just spend the round scanning, build up a bunch of dice, maybe spend some hope to get some more bonus dice. And then the next round you're firing with, 6d6 bonus. And you get 2 success icons and you hit a piercing shot and, potentially that's how you one-shot Smog. That's right. And, the magic black arrow doesn't hurt either. And again, I could totally see a GM house ruling, or maybe there's even some supplements that people have released, where you might add some additional combat tasks so that when you're in forward, you can attack, you could intimidate, and maybe there's another option. And if you're in open, you can attack, or you can rally, or there's another option. And if you're in defensive stance, and again, you don't have to do this. I think these are enough choices, especially if you're only fighting once every other session or two. That's fine. This is another great piece of art. I love it. Okay, so we also get rules for fleeing. Fly, you fools. Player heroes facing insurmountable odds and intending to leave the fight have 2 options. First, they can assume a rearward stance and then choose to escape as their turn. No roll is required to do so, and the same applies to the adversaries who choose to stand back and thus remain unengaged. Okay, so going back to our example, let's say the fight isn't going well. When Ronin's turn comes up, Ronin can choose to disengage from the fight because they were in rearward. Okay? Otherwise, you have to be in the defensive stance and you have to roll for your attack. And if it's successful, then you don't do any damage, but you leave the battlefield instead. Now, do you have to choose before you make your attack roll whether that's a disengage roll or not? Okay, if the attack roll fails, the combatant remains engaged. Okay, so you have to make a choice, right? So, like, this is where, Shadram and Metro go, well, Darth is probably in a bad situation here, but, like, this is where if people are in close combat, right, because you can only have one person in rearward, right? So Ronin leaves. We go, Ronin, get out. And then next round, Darth falls back to range. And we can do this still because we have 2 people. And Shadram and Dr. Metro, but then here's the problem. You get a penalty to your dice for each thing. So Dr. Metro stays here. Shadram tries to hold the line. They climb in like this. And then Darth nopes out. Shadram makes an attack. Doesn't fail. Decides to retreat. Makes an attack. Doesn't do any damage. He escapes. And then the final round. Now, the good news is only 3 man-sized people can be engaged, right? Heroes can be engaged by 3 human-sized creatures. So the rest of the orcs are kind of just snarling around, waiting to engage. That's terrifying. I guess technically they fall back because you're being shot at by these goblin archers too. But should Dr. Metro succeed, actually Dr. Metro decides to go out like a real. So he has to go. He falls back to defensive stance, and then makes his check, and then leaves. But maybe he doesn't leave, and instead he's killed. By the way, there's this thing here called skirmish. This is only apparently for the solo game. More than likely, Dr. Metro doesn't make it and dies. But hey, look, things could happen. And the fellowship were able to run. Right? He goes, "Fly, you fools!" All right, R.I.P. R.I.P. Dr. Metro. Can I kill you? R.I.P. Dr. Metro. He died so that the company could live. We'll never forget your sacrifice. That's pretty cool. That's a neat little system for running away. I mean, I don't know. It seems like a cool combat system to me. I could be tempted to like try to like make it a little bit more tactical and like, add in a little bit more positioning, but I don't think you need to. I think there's enough choices here that it's just, easy to do. I don't think we really have to worry about it. Oh, look at this. This is nice. I didn't even see this. This overlay has that. I wonder, did I configure? Okay. I think they have one without the skirmish thing too. Oh, that seems pretty legit to me. Let's take a look. I'm curious. Let's see. Adversaries. What do we got here? Moria. Core. All right, we got trolls. All right, here's a great cave troll. Obviously, we need to be bigger. All right, there we go. Great cave troll. Much more fearsome. All right, what is the great cave troll? 80 endurance. Brutal. And it also has 2 I think it could take 2 wounds. So it doesn't die on the first. It's like a PC. It dies on 1 wound. By the way, remember that like, your party might have like your dwarf might have like 29 endurance. So this thing's got 80 endurance. Very cool. Crush and bite. That's a lot. Yeah. I mean, you could hack through this guy pretty nice. I mean, he doesn't have any parry. So there's that. Jordan says, and this game's solo mode is A+. It's called Strider mode. And there's a free PDF, and the Moria book has its own variant. So right. So Jordan, I haven't really gotten into it yet, but I understand there's like a solo. It was written by Sean Tompkins, who did Iron Sworn for Moria. And it's got like oracles. So it's kind of got like a Game Master emulator in it. And it's like you represent an entire company of dwarves going into Moria and trying to like reclaim it. And I don't like solo games, but man, that sounds pretty awesome. And maybe that's something that we could maybe do on the stream someday or for the Patreon or something. That'd be pretty sweet. It's not perfect, but it works very well. My biggest issue with it was a confusion around mental theater of the mind versus the abstract arrangement of the positions. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna like worry too much about it. I think it's just like the fiction still matters. And, if somebody describes them, moving back and climbing up to a elevated position, I might be like, yeah, cool. Make your check and, you get a bonus to your attacks because you have an advantaged position. I mean, I think it's just, yeah, like you said, theater of the mind. But it is tempting, or it is easy to sort of notice or be in a mindset that like, because they even said like the players have to engage with monsters who can be engaged, right? And so potentially if a player, is in a certain situation and then maybe a monster's in a certain situation, you can't engage them. They're unengageable. They've made themselves unavailable. So yeah. Anyways, I think this is a really, really cool set of combat rules, and it's pretty simple. And yeah, I didn't use this diagram. Foundry lets you set your stance each round, and then we use a gridless map to show the layout of the space. I see. Well, I mean, obviously this is Foundry. I don't Yeah, okay, I can see where it is here. You can set your stance. Thing is like, I kind of like this because this is not really, this is just tracking mechanics. We're not really worried about positioning. The position is all theater of the mind, which I think is great. And, you know, in my opinion, more so than any other game, Lord of the Rings combats, you know, are more realistic in that they are this swirling, chaotic melee of crushing and clashing bodies where it changes every round. And the fact that you can just re-engage whenever you want, you know, I think makes this a lot of, you know, sense. That's possibility, Beowulf, but then it wouldn't stack with Weary, so that's a little weird. But you could figure out the math on it. I don't know. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with the parry rule. It's totally normal. We're used to adding numbers to DCs. It's just when I have this like TN thing and everything else in the game is adding dice and subtracting dice, why is this the one thing that doesn't? I hate when there's the one thing that doesn't. Now, Shadram, while I agree with you that you struggle with people without visual representation of the combat, that's true. But I think there's something to be said here. The visual representation of the combat doesn't actually matter here. Like if you're playing a game where the visual representation of the combat matters, where you're like, oh, well, you're flanked now. And you're like, what do you mean I'm flanked? I told you how the two orcs were coming from either side. And you're like, dude, I need a map so I know what the hell's going on. Well, that doesn't exist in this system. So it's less of an issue, right? And I mean, I don't by any means begrudge anybody for using a map and using that to that point. But I think that one of my main reasons for people who struggle without it is because, you know, because it matters. Pathfinder 2, 5th edition DD, it matters. You know, hey, the rogue goes, can I sneak attack? And I go, I don't know. Are you in melee with another ally? And you're like, I don't know. Well, we were describing it last round. Are you? And he's like, I don't know. I'm in combat with an orc. I don't know. Is that the same orc that Beowulf is in combat with? I have no idea. That matters because your abilities literally are tied to that. Nothing here works that way, at least as far as I can tell. So there's some element here of, you know, not, you know. So I think if anything, you might get too rigid in your definition of things if you actually stuck to using a map. So yeah, because again, like I said, because it's like if you start thinking about it in terms of like a, you know, combat and awareness, because if you're using imagine this was a real map, okay, and I don't even remember how, you know, sometimes I will admit this, sometimes Roll20 is nice because sometimes things are. Okay, so we've got the orcs in red, right? And it's like, okay, well, in round 1 of the fight, we had Ronan in forward position, and this orc and this orc and this orc were on Ronan, and that was who was attacking Ronan, right? Like it was a complete and total clusterfuck here. Goblins are shooting. Everything's terrible. Dr. Metro's dead. He's back from the dead. But anyways, and then, you know, let's say that, you know, he kills one of them. None of the other orcs die. Maybe Shadram kills one. Okay, cool. Well, then next round, you guys choose. Maybe you guys go, we're going to still be in the same formation.
Esports event.
It's not, your phone doesn't listen to you. For some odd reason, my phone just decided that when I said next round, it should. He's dead, but he keeps hitting me. Anyways, so I still have the advantage here. I still get to make the assignments. And so then I go, okay, well, this round, you know, this orc is going here, and 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 this orc is going here. And Ronan's like, wait a minute, what about the two orcs that were fighting me? Do I get like, what's that? What do you mean? They're gone? They're fighting other people now? Like, is there an attack of opportunity? And I'm like, well, no, it's just one big swirling melee. And you're like, well, like, so if we were thinking of this as like a physical location, this reassignment may not make as much sense. And so, but per the rules of the game, this is how it would work. And also, too, originally, before the errata, once those red orcs were engaged with Ronin, you couldn't leave. They were stuck in place. Yes, exactly. You were using the old rules, so they were stuck in place. So, you know, and that's what I was saying before. The original rules were like, once these engagements were made, you couldn't change. You were locked. Now, let's say Dr. Metro killed their orc soldier. Now, Dr. Metro, who is back from the dead, could go to a different stance, could engage a different orc. But before, that only happened if they were literally dead, and nobody was on you. So he's not dead; he's just resting. But now you can kind of reassign these people every round, and so it would be kind of weird if you were like using real, quote unquote, real positioning. That's my thought process on it. I think it would make it really strange. And actually, thinking about it, we did use your circle thingy for Forbidden Lands combat, and that worked fine. Very cool. Yeah. And the way we did it in Forbidden Lands was that everybody in a zone was in melee, basically, of everybody else in that zone. So we did have this idea of they're over there and you're right here, but everybody in that zone was considered to be meleeable, basically. And there was no like attack opportunity or anything like that. All right, well, it's 2 a.m. and somehow this stream took 3 hours. I don't even know how that's possible, but it did. Hey, shout out. So tomorrow, Tuesday, or today, I guess later today, we're going to be doing Shadow of the White Wizard, or Shadow of the White Wizard, Weird Wizard. Shadow of the Weird Wizard. We've been talking too much about Lord of the Rings, so now when I hear Weird Wizard, I want to keep saying it's the White Wizard. Careful, he'll put a spell on you. There's also a game company called Wise Wizard Games. Anyways, Shadow of the Weird Wizard. So we're gonna be taking a look at that tomorrow. This is a book I kickstarted. I really like Shadow of the Demon Lord. I really like Rob Schwalb, but I haven't actually checked out this book yet. So this will be a new one for me. Now, supposedly, there's some nice changes made here. One of the big changes is just the tone of the game. Shadow of the Demon Lord, a little too gritty for me. But this is a little bit more fantasy-esque. And apparently there are some changes to some of the rules of the game. I probably don't know Shadow of the Demon Lord well enough to be able to really understand them, but anything spooky planned for Halloween season? Well, Shadram, 2 years ago, Boothby tipped for a Call of Cthulhu one-shot, which we never did. And that continues. Especially because it's Halloween and God knows all the guys are going to be going trick-or-treating with their kids. See, I thought it was a problem when the kids were babies because they're like, oh, I got the babies. Turns out I was completely wrong. It's now that all the kids are like between the ages of like 6 and 12, it's the worst because now they are literally doing nothing but kids shit all the time. I myself on Friday, I don't know what I'm going to be doing. I don't hand out candy. I don't want to be bothered. And no gaming night because all the guys are going to be trick-or-treating. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll stream. Part of the problem too is I am the last person to talk about horror or horror games. I mean, I think part of the reason Boothby even wanted me and tip for the Call of Cthulhu game was because he wanted to see me suffer. I mean, there's always a number of people who just, they do things because they want to see me suffer. But because that would definitely be suffering for me. Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that, unfortunately Bob's kids are much younger, but and Smith had 3 of them, so they're kind of spaced out. And Tim's are like 10 and 7 or something like that. So unfortunately, they all had multiple kids. So as soon as one is in, finally maybe like a teenager or teenager, then another one has to, whatever. So it's going to be, I don't know, a good 10 years or something like that. So I have 5 of my own. That's crazy. I have 0 And I don't feel like I have enough time for everything I want to do in my life. I can only imagine. No, my friends are more like, I had to go to a soccer game today, so I'm not doing anything. And I don't blame them. I'd want to sleep for the next 10 days. Anyways, well, I'm gonna have to update this thumbnail and just say combat. Because apparently we didn't get to councils or journeys, which are the other important parts of the adventuring phase. And we still have to cover the fellowship phase, and we still have to cover the GM stuff and the lore master stuff and how magic items work and treasure and monsters and the Eye of Sauron and its presence and hunting you down. I'm just really bad and slow at going through these games because I talk about them and really think about them and really spend a lot of time talking with you all. Anyways, hopefully you will join me later today, tomorrow, Tuesday, and we will, cheers to you too, Shadram. And we'll be talking about Shadow of the Weird Wizard. And then on Thursday, we're going to be talking about Worlds Without Number, one of the many Without Number games made by Cine Nome Publishing and Kevin Crawford. Started with Stars Without Number, then Worlds Without Number, Cities Without Number, something else without number. He's made a whole empire on Without Number. We'll take a look. Like most people, I bought the book so that I could steal the world creation rules. But apparently there's a game there too, I've been told. So even though I've owned the book and used the book, it will be a first look. Because I've never read the actual rule of the game, because I never cared. Ashes Without Number. Okay, post-apocalyptic. Yeah, so all over the place. All right, everybody. Well, I will talk to you later. Hope you enjoyed this little look into the more further deep dive into the One Ring and enjoyed some of the conversations. If you have any ideas about Parry and whether you think I'm being just a baby, again, it's not too hard to just add a number. But what are we doing here? We should just stick to a single number. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Good night, everybody. Peace.